Hello everyone and welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Board, and welcome to anyone who's watching us online as well. So first of all, I'd just like to ask our officer to read the housekeeping notice.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for Live Broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the car park at the front of the building. Finally, please could everyone ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and that mobile phones and other devices are switched off or turned to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, I'll ask the clerk if there are any apologies for the meeting.
Yes, Chair, we've had apologies for this meeting from our normal Chair, Councillor Kate Salmon, from Councillor Leslie Dedman and Councillor Claire Waite, but Councillor Waite is joining us online. We have Councillor Alistair Keddy substituting for Councillor Salmon.
Thank you. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interest or any other interest on any items in this agenda? No? Okay, that's good. If anyone has got their microphone on, if I could just ask them to mute it, because I think we were getting a little bit of noise there, and that for anyone who's online as well, just to make sure your microphone is muted so that we don't hear any little noises that that are happening where you are. Okay, so first of all, we have a look at the minutes of the last meeting. That's the minutes of the meeting held on 23rd of February 2026. Does anyone have any comments they'd like to make? Any problems with those minutes? Or can we just agree those? Okay, can I have consensus for that? Okay, that's great. We go on to the recommendation tracker. So the recommendation tracker is the it's looking at the recommendations we've made in past meetings and checking whether we've had responses for them. The only thing that I have for an update at the moment is that the consultation framework, which has gone to Cabinet, we are expecting to have a response for that at our June meeting. That has been put back from the May meeting because we have a lot of business to discuss. So that will be the June meeting. Any comments or questions on the recommendation tracker? Okay. Can I just ask whether we have any public issues?
No public issues, Chair.
Okay, thank you. In that case, we'll go on to our first substantive item, which is parking around schools. So, first of all, I would just like to thank everyone who has come for this item. In particular, we have Rachel Rustling, who is the head teacher of Baden Powell and St Peter's CE Junior School. So welcome to you. And we also have Mike Freeborn, who's the area operations manager of Moorbus. Both of these people have joined us online so that they can give us their perspective. You will all know that this is an item that we have been discussing before, and we decided that we wanted to have further discussion on this and invite people. So I'm going to just have a look and see. Oh, I'm just going to mention we did invite Dorset Police as well, but it was very short notice, so they weren't able to make it. So the format of this item, first of all, I'm going to ask Councillors Felicity Rice and Sandra Macro to address the board, because they have been acting as rapporteur for this item. Following their comments, I'm going to ask Rachel and Mike if they'd like to make any comments at that time, but they can speak later on if they like, just by raising a hand on. Then I will be inviting comments from portfolio holders. That's Richard Herritt, Richard Burton, and Andy Hadley. And following their comments, Amanda Barry or Helen Taverner, who are the relevant officers, will also be invited to address the board. So we've got quite a few people to speak. After this, everyone can join in and put your hand up and speak, okay? So let me just go back to the beginning and ask Councillors Felicity Rice and Sandra Macro if you would like to address the board with your findings.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the board as well. Felicity and I have been working quite closely together on this, and credit to Felicity for typing up notes and things, because she's a lot more whizzy than I am. So I can't take any credit for that, but the input is much the same as in Felicity, if you don't mind me saying, I'm just going to add it's regarding our findings first. So then when we have the discussion, the recommendations that we've put forward, we'll see if they match with other people's opinions, and we might even find more recommendations, but I'll add those at the end, and feel free to chip in when you want to. So generally, the findings is that it's a general deterioration in driver behaviour outside schools, particularly over the decades, and obviously people's parents, carers' lifestyles, as in dropping children off to work, off to school as they go off to work. So there is an increased road danger to children going to and from school. And it has been said there's more cars on the road, so it's not safe for my children to walk and things like that. So obviously then it's regulations around different types of street markings, such as zigzags, double yellows and no loading. We're of the belief that there is education needed, because certain people do feel, oh no, I can park there, or no, you can't park there. So it is that continuity of what is acceptable and what is not. So strictly parking on those certain zigzags are a no-no, but then again it comes back to education. And the pavement parking ban is hopefully coming this year, so that will see hopefully some change, because also it is a case of cars parking on a pavement, and then that restricts people like with pushchairs and mobility scooters. So it's an ongoing thing, and this affects not just children going to and from school, but anybody that's walking around from schools in the morning, and particular at home time, because we have found that this is more of a home time collection point thing. School streets are successful, and where they're immediately outside school, and I've got personal connections with that, because the infant and junior school that all my children went to, that became a school street where it was actually sectioned off, so it's no vehicular access into the school, and staff can get into school via a different way. So it is totally no traffic, because previously, years back, it was a two-way road, then it went to a one-way road, and now it is literally, so you've got children in the morning kicking about footballs. They've even got benches, and I'm so jealous, because I finished my school journey there in 2024. So yeah, so a lot of improvements, and there's colourful road markings. If you get a chance to go down there, please take advice from me, go and have a look. It's Livingstone Road Primary, which is in Newtown Ward, and yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. Schools, when schools are expected, there's an opportunity to look at transport issues in more detail, so that's something that can be discussed. And we do feel it's currently a missed opportunity, but I'm sure Felicity can add a little bit more onto that. I've just mentioned adjustments to timing on arrival of enforcement officers discussed. However, no change will be implemented currently following national guidance. Concerns about, but then again, this is mainly to do with picking up, because that is, and I've received emails from residents, and some of the language that has been expressed by persons parking where they shouldn't is not acceptable, because like I say, it impacts everyone, residents, and yeah, I've said all that. Different regulations from a council enforcement point of view compared with a police. So it is that marrying up of, and I've made some notes as I've been sat here as well, and it is that the school, as in what responsibilities has the school got. I'll say it again, on the school journey that I've had, newsletters would go out constantly saying, please be mindful of residents parking, and the parents, it is unfortunate that some parents do feel that they have a right to park where they can, where they do, and also it is the enforcement issue, as in having that blanket, this and this, and then there can't be any confusion, can they? Because I'll say it in one email that I have received, I will just very quickly click over where one resident, and I'm going to speak, it's not a resident in my ward, but where they were boxed in, waiting for the owner to come back, and then some very choice words were put, and I won't read it out exactly, but it was said, whinging, blah, 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 where else can I park? And I say blah, 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 but it would be expletives there. So that's me for a minute. And Felicity, if you want to add anything, thank you, my lovely.
Would you like to add anything, please? Councillor Rice.
Yes, that's great. Thank you, Sandra. Yeah, we had a lovely meeting with officers, and we discussed everything that Sandra's sort of mentioned, and were able to go into quite a lot of detail. All I would add, I suppose, is in terms of school streets being successful, I think there is a lot of acknowledgement and enthusiasm from schools and councillors in terms of expanding this and rolling this out, but the funding is just so limited in order to roll that out faster. But they are very useful. And yeah, you mentioned about when schools are expanded. So that was the point of, as we're trying to introduce satellite schools into existing school areas, or expanding buildings to take more pupils, then there is an opportunity for the teams involved to look specifically at transportation to that school. And sometimes what's happening is that the new satellite school is being introduced and the transport to it is not being thought about, or how it impacts on, for example, a school street potential in the future. And then, yeah, in terms of the arrivals of the parking enforcement, that was something that we were keen to be able to discuss, and whether there was any flexibility around that. There isn't any flexibility in terms of we're following best practice. The council is following best practice at the moment in terms of when they arrive and how they ticket and how they enforce. But it does come on to one of our recommendations about improving communication from the enforcement team to all councillors and separately to all head teachers and their school staff, so that they know what enforcement officers can do and what they can't do. And so having that clearly on a sheet, because what's happening is sometimes you get parents coming up to head teachers reporting that enforcement hasn't occurred, and then that's difficult for head teachers, it's difficult for councillors and parents, and sometimes then there can be a breakdown in relationship, and so then the enforcement officers aren't being used as they should be, in terms of sort of asking them to come when there is an issue, and so it's just about better understanding of what they can and can't do, and then also the differences of what the police can also do and how members of the public can report issues to the police, which is completely separate legal process from what parking enforcement officers can do. And so again, one of the recommendations about that is information that can be shared so that people that want to be able to do something about it are empowered to do something using the police rather than the council services. Yes, so there were some other recommendations, but I think we're gonna, did you want to cover those later, Sandra?
Yes, please.
Yeah, cool.
Can I just add, yes, we did meet up with officers, and I would like to thank the officers because it was very interesting to be able to say things and get proper feedback and what you shouldn't be. So I would just like to put it on record to thank the officers for the work that helped us too. Felicity, thank you.
So, in terms of the recommendations, are you thinking that I will take all the speakers in terms of everybody except the general debate, and then you will put the recommendations, and then we'll have the debate? Okay, okay, that's good. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to ask Rachel Rustling, who is head teacher of Baden Powell and St Peter's Church of England Junior School, if you would like to address the committee about your experiences of schools and parking.
Okay, hello everyone. Right. I don't think there's been a year where we've not had any problems with parking. It's an endemic. It's been going on for as long as I've been a head teacher. I think it's got significantly worse since the pandemic. I don't know why, but it's definitely been more noticeable over the last few years. We're quite unique as a school because we're a large junior school. We actually have 2 entrances to our school, which makes it even more burdensome when it comes to managing the parking and inconsiderate driving around school. We have persistent problems. They create significant hazards for our children. It has caused strained relationships with our local community. It places an unfair burden on staff who are quite often required to intervene where there are disputes between parents and residents or even members of staff. And I've been exasperated by the behaviour not only of a minority of our parent community, but also by some of the residents. But I completely empathise with the residents because they're just frustrated because sometimes they can't get into their own homes, they can't get onto their driveways because their driveways are being blocked by a minority of our parents. Numerous ways in which we experience issues, mainly inconsiderate parking. So that will be cars stationed on single yellow lines and double yellow lines and zigzagged areas. Even though we have 2 entrances, we only have zigzags for one of the entrances. So I'm trying to push to see if we can have zigzags in the other entrance, because actually the irony of this is the other entrance to school is busier than the entrance that actually does have the zigzags. We have obstructions of the roads near school where parents are blocking thoroughfares, making it difficult for vehicles to pass through, and in some cases emergency services. So I'll often get complaints from residents where perhaps an ambulance is trying to get down a cul-de-sac or road, but they can't get down because their car's parked on both sides, so it's causing an obstruction. Refusal by some of our parents to park slightly further away, even though it's safer and there are more suitable spaces, just a short walk away from school. We've had some dangerous near misses, particularly in the Windsor Road vicinity of the school. We have parents who park on islands as well, causing damage to the environment, obstructing spaces, particularly where some children might be waiting to be collected at the end of the school day. A big issue with car engines being left idling during drop-off and pick-up times, which is of course harmful to the environment and detrimental to the children's health. We've had a few fractious disagreements between adults over parking rights, which is obviously not the type of behaviour that we would want our children to witness or emulate. There was even a fight a few weeks ago between a parent and somebody dropping off some equipment to a house just up the road. We have frequent complaints from residents who are quite rightly frustrated and exasperated by the ongoing disruption outside their homes. This happens on a regular basis. I frequently write to the parents, but unfortunately to no avail. It doesn't seem to make a huge amount of difference. Over the years, we've had working groups where we've invited parents in. I think the big issue, and it's already been mentioned, is obviously a lot of parents are working. They're in a rush to get their children to school. Some of them have siblings that have to be dropped off at other schools. Everybody leads busy lives now. And what I'm finding is, even though we try to get involvement from the parent community, there's quite a degree of apathy that exists now. So whilst parents are quite quick to complain about it themselves, actually trying to get parents to volunteer to help when it comes to parking, such as School Street, we've had limited success. So that's the issue we have, because we haven't got the manpower or staffing to be able to manage that ourselves. So um, any type of arrangement such as School Street, which is a really, really great way of keeping the roads safe, it's fallen on deaf ears because we just haven't had anybody coming forward willing to take up that voluntary role to help run that. So that's where we're at really at the moment. It quietens down for a bit, and then it I don't know why, goes through peaks and troughs, things pick up again, and it's the same old issue that I'm having to deal with. So I'm trying to keep the peace with the residents, but I'm also trying to keep the peace with the parents. I get a lot of abuse in the process as well. So there's no easy fix. I wish there was a solution, but I just feel that I'm banging my head against a brick wall as a head teacher.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. That was a really useful insight for us to get the view from school. Just wanted to ask, I understand it's a really difficult problem. Is there anything you can think of that you would like the council to do to help?
I think road markings would make a difference. I'm not quite sure with that though, how easy it is to simply put more zigzag lines in or put double yellow lines in, because obviously there would be residents who might disagree with double yellows being put outside their homes. But I think if there were more obvious markings, that would make a big difference. The issue we've had with any parking enforcement is nothing has really happened because they're not often challenging the parents. They may stand there, so they might turn up once every few months and stand there. Harder for our school because we've got the two entrances. But I feel that they're not challenging the parents at the same time. So if they don't challenge the parents, then they'll continue to abuse the situation. But I'm not sure what their rights are either. So it's not that I'm blaming them, but I don't think they act as a deterrent in any way.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I hope that you will, later on, I will ask when we have the debate, people may want to ask questions of you. I hope that you'll be happy to answer those, but I won't do questions for everybody now because that will all take too long. Is that okay?
Yeah, my issue is I can't stay online for very long. So in terms of time, how long are we looking at here?
Okay, in that case, I will just ask, does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask that are very specific to the experience of this one school? Councillor Beasley.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, it was really just to try and to point in the right direction over school streets, because it's about the amount of take-up and so on. I can only speak for the school, and we only have one school in Westbourne and Westcliff Ward, and that's St Michael's Primary. And the head teacher there has been really proactive in this. We have a school street scheme which was long overdue because there was a real issue to face up to, and it's been hugely successful around controlling a road called Somerville Road. And there may be lessons learnt in there, or there may be staging posts that he can direct you to make it work.
Can I just ask Councillor Beasley, is this a question for Rachel? Because we'll come to the debate later, but I just want to know if you have any particular questions for Rachel about her experience.
It was specifically about the issue she raised just a moment ago, and I just wanted to make sure I'd said it to her before she leaves, because she's leaving fairly soon.
That's fine. Thank you then.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we have actually spoken to other schools that run school streets successfully, and we worked quite closely last year with BCP and Sustrans as well to try and see if we could set it up. The problem we've got is the only road that would possibly work. We have two roads that lead to the school. One is called Mill Lane, which is off Pottery Road, and the other road is Windsor Road, which is the back entrance to the school. The irony of this is the back entrance is actually the busiest part of the school. That's where most children get dropped off and collected at the end of the day. That's where really, if we were going to have a school street, that's where it would need to be. The problem is it won't work because there are too many tributary roads off Windsor Road and it would be impossible to actually close it. But that is the most problematic area. So whilst it could be achieved on Mill Lane, actually that is the quieter area. It almost needs somebody to come and look at the school because it's quite hard to explain. And obviously, with the senior leadership team, I am as proactive as I can be, but I can only be in one place at any one time. And when we've got two entrances to the school, that becomes a little bit more problematic.
Well, thank you very much for that. Your insight is really helpful to us. I think there's someone else who's indicated, and were you indicating a question?
Yes, thank you,
Or
Chair.
Rachel? Okay, Councillor Keddy.
Hi, Rachel. It's really insightful to hear from you. I had a question. Does your school engage in any of the active travel schemes?
Yes, we do.
And and have you engaged in the school travel surveys and identifying safe routes to school?
Yes, we do.
And I'm interested to know if that's had any kind of an impact on the experience.
To a degree, we obviously do bikeability. We do cycle to school schemes. What's the one that BCP runs? There's a scheme that BCP uses in all the schools locally. I can't remember what it's called. We engage in any initiative that is offered to us to encourage safe routes to school, safe ways of getting to school. So we do everything we can to support that. The problem is we have a lot of parents who are working who will still transport their children to school via car. So we try to discourage it as much as possible. We try to use our children as well. Bribery and corruption works all the time to try and see if they can discourage their parents from using cars to get them to school because of the environmental impact, etc. But unfortunately, the success is quite limited.
That's really interesting feedback. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have another question. They're all coming out now. So,
It wasn't so much a question as a comment because Parkstone is in my patch. And I just wanted to say that I do know, Rachel, that I've seen or visited many of the residents down there, and the whole of Pottery Road really needs sorting out. You've got a problem with pick up and drop off. You've also got a problem because it's a main road for a bus. There are drives with drop curbs all the way along there. The single yellow line only goes up to Mill Lane and then stops. There are vans that park there because it is a free parking area. And that's one of the things that the residents, this is particular to Pottery Road. The other thing is I do have a friend or friends who also comes to Windsor Road and uses a wheelchair, and she can't use the pavements because the cars are parked on the pavements. So it is a major issue, and it's one that I was elected in 2023, and it is now 2026. And Emily and I went to talk to Rachel about this 3 years ago, and I have to say, not much has changed. So if we could have a look at the transport situation, that would be really useful because I think it needs a holistic view. Thank you.
So we've got a lot of people to get through talking. So I just want to check, there's a debate afterwards, no more comments, okay? Only questions for Rachel. If you've got a question for Rachel, put your hand up. Don't want to hear any more comments till a bit later on in the debate, okay? Sharon, have you got a question?
It was a comment / suggestion to Rachel.
Oh, okay. So if it's to Rachel, if it's specifically to Rachel, go ahead, but make sure that it is, because if it's just part of the general debate for us, it comes later.
Hello, thank you, Chair. Good evening. No, Rachel, the only thing I wanted to say was just from some work that I've done in my ward. I just wondered if you'd spoken to Queen's Park Infant Academy. They run, and for the life of it, I'm dragging my memory banks for this official name, but they run an eco campaign with their children, and they actually credit them any amount of walking or wheeling. And that means that they actually encourage their parents, they don't stop them from driving as such, but they ask them to park slightly further away, and then they can walk and wheel the last little bit into school and still get the badge and still partake in the scheme. And I just wondered if you'd come across that. And I'm so sorry, I can't remember the full name.
No, that's okay. We do that ourselves. So we do say that they can drive part of the way and then they can scoot the last section. So that's something that we encourage as well. Queen's Park Infant Academy is one of our trust schools as well. So we work quite closely with them. But thank you. I really appreciate that suggestion. But that's something we offer anyway.
Thank you very much. And don't worry, because that's really helpful. I think that Councillor Hadley, have you got a question for Rachel? Yes.
I do, thank you. Yes, it's just a really simple question. Sorry, I'm one of the portfolio holders. I'm portfolio holder for transport apart from road safety, which is Councillor Herrick. Just on the back entrance, as you described, Windsor Road is much more busy, but there is a sort of a build out not far from outside your entrance. Does it have any effect at all at stopping people coming right up to the gate to park? Because it seems to just protect a couple of driveways and your entrance.
Yeah, it's Mill Lane entrance, it's not so bad. Where the zigzags are right near the school, the parents won't come up to that. So there's probably about 15 to 20 metres where parents will not park at all. And that's where the zigzag is really effective. What we need is something like that in Windsor Road, because I think that would act more of a deterrent, certainly to get the cars to park further back. My only worry is, and this will be the same everywhere, if the cars can't park nearer to the school, the only thing it does is it pushes the problem further back. And I don't quite know what the solution is to that, because I often get complaints from residents now where the parents are not necessarily parking on Mill Lane, but they're parking on Pottery Road, or they're parking in some of the cul-de-sacs off Pottery Road, which is then causing further hazards where you've got much narrower roads leading into cul-de-sacs where people can't get in and out. So I don't know what the solution is to that. So we're trying to get people to park further away. Sometimes they are trying to do that, but then it almost backfires.
Yeah, I think in my experience, or the understanding I have, is that the further they park away, the more chance there is at least a few of them might think this is stupid.
Yes.
I could walk the whole distance and get them to change.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more questions for Rachel, or are we ready to move on and hear from Mike Freeborn, who is the Area Operations Manager from Moorbus? You're there, Mike?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Brilliant. Cool. Thank you firstly for inviting me and Moorbus as a whole unit. So in terms of the bus operation, we've not got any specific recent events that have occurred in terms of outside of school blocking buses, because generally these are off the main roads we serve, but equally we do still struggle in terms of the overall parking. And I guess for us, it's more the case that to explain that inconsiderate illegal parking poses a challenge to us in terms of adhering to our timetable, because of course this slows the bus down due to being accused of traffic, and then we often have to squeeze by, which our drivers are professional, they're used to squeezing by lots of obstacles, but it does bring its challenges in terms of where we have less able people who particularly need to be dropped off a raised curb for whatever reason. If we can't serve that stop because a car's parked often due to, though we can't say it's linked to necessarily to school, because obviously, as has been alluded to, where you push the problem out from the actual school itself, people then start parking a bit more further afield, but still parking a bit haphazardly and with less care and attention. So we then have the problem of getting actually to the stops itself to drop people off, alight them. And again, there's that heightened risk where you have more vehicles parked badly or inconsiderately A, of us making collision with them, and B, where you've got children running out between vehicles to cross roads where they're not at a crossing because the parents have tried to park as close to the school as possible. That comes with its own risks. So it's all kind of a linked up problem in terms of that. But we've been fortunate in terms of the few areas we've highlighted with BCP in particular, where we've had issues with parking that has been dealt with yellow lines and other options. But I guess, again, the enforcement issue is always the next challenge, because people always play ball when someone turns up, but the minute they go away, it's like the cat's away, the mice play. They start then obviously parking indiscriminately again. So it's that kind of, it's how you deal with that challenge of keeping it enforced, because I do agree with what people have said in terms of the pandemic has definitely shifted attitudes towards people's, I wouldn't say selfish, but they just don't seem quite so a moral compass, probably is how I'd put it, in terms of how they think about where they park. And I actually live very close to a school, actually back onto the school where I live, and I can see it all the time in terms of where people park and how they block roads and driveways, how frustrating it can be. Now, I'm fortunate that I generally cycle or use the bus, so if they park near my driveway, I'm okay. But it definitely is a rising problem, and we've had an instance where in Oakdale Junior, I believe they closed Palmer Road for a period and made that kind of a safe zone, which did help in terms of that. But again, you had the problem with people parking on the main roads again, and also our bus that then couldn't actually get to the grounds itself to drop the children off because it was also excluded. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts in terms of how you deal with it. But I think we also noticed that generally on poorer weather days, people naturally drive more. So if it rains, we know we're going to have more of an issue in terms of people parking, more cars on the road generally, but also people parking badly and worse, I guess.
Thank you. That's really, really helpful. I think I'd like to ask you a question of, if you're happy. Are you happy to take questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, so I can see that schools the streets being blocked is a big problem for buses, but at the same time, I can also see that buses are in their own way part of the solution, because if the children got onto the bus instead of getting to the car, then we wouldn't have so many cars. So I just wanted to ask, everyone's saying it's getting worse. It's been worse since the pandemic. Are you seeing less children on buses, or is it the same number of children on the buses as before? Has it got less? And if you wanted to say anything about how you think maybe buses could be part of the solution.
Yeah, I would agree that generally bus travel in terms of students on board has dropped. We still get a decent number, but not probably the same number we used to. I'd agree with that. And we obviously offer a variety of services. Some are more open door in terms of how they operate, and some are closed door to students only. And I guess the longer haul runs, some of the routes we run go quite a distance in terms of where they begin and where they end. So they'll be more popular with students. But yeah, I would say in general, bus travel has probably dropped in terms of the number of pupils using it. I would agree with that. And in terms of, what was the second question? Was it what we offer or can offer in terms of solution?
Really, I was just saying, how do you have either any suggestions or anything that you think would be helpful in order to help buses become part of the solution?
I absolutely think we can be part of the solution, because we obviously can take, as we've alluded to many times on our adverts, that 75 cars off the road on paper, in terms of if every student boarded that, there's one less car. So we definitely can be part of the solution. We have options, and we serve a lot of the network around the BCP area and even Dorset as well. And therefore, we can certainly do more and serve more if we were given, I think there'd be a question in terms of, as always, it's the funding element in terms of where that money comes from. But we definitely can become part of that solution if the routing was right and the funding was right to help get more people. I guess the reason why people don't use the bus is convenience, isn't it? It's the time that where we start a route. Sometimes if you begin that route and it's quite a long route, by the time you get to school, you can be 45 minutes down the line. So that's where it will put, I think, some parents off in terms of using the bus, because and the student itself, because they have to get up that little bit earlier to get the bus. And we're always wary of making the route too long for that reason, because obviously that will put people off in terms of getting to the school and then getting home from the school. But equally, we do serve a large part of the network, and even in terms of, yes, we run specific school buses to schools, but also we do find lots of pupils just generally jump on the network buses to get to school, because we actually go quite close to a lot of the school gates themselves.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. Does anyone else have any questions? Councillor Northover.
Thank you. I just wondered if you have access to data around where children live in relation to the different schools and their age ranges. So, for instance, if there is a secondary school, would you, as the bus company, have the data about which postcodes the children live in? Or is that something the local authority would have? And do they share it with you? Or is it something even the local authority doesn't have? I don't know.
The local authority would have it. Again, it depends on the service. So if they're jumping on a network bus, we wouldn't know that. But if it's a specific school bus that is operated purely to run students to an actual school, and not, it's kind of, so we have two school services, one that are open doors, which means that the public can board if they wish to, and closed door, which means only students can board and can board, no one else. So from the closed door perspective, we would know what students are boarding where, because we get requests generally from the schools themselves in terms of, we work with them to basically plot our routing and where we run the service and who we pick up where. For the open door, it's similar again, but maybe not quite so transparent. But generally, we would serve a route and work with the school if they said, look, there's a better way of running this route that picks up more students. Can you consider that? We would definitely look at that and consider the options. So again, on both sides, we don't necessarily have all the data to begin with, but over time we build that almost like sort of book where we kind of work out where students go, and then we find out that pupils then left that school who used to go down a road, so we stopped serving that road because it was literally to pick up that one person. I mean, to be fair, that's probably more Dorset than BCP itself, but both are relevant in that case. So yeah, we don't have all the data, but generally over time we do build it up.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's I had residents make representations on this to me, but it's one of our subsidised routes which operates during the day, but it doesn't operate until after the school times. But one of the suggestions was, can't we run a bus at the time where the kids are going to school? And we have effectively, well, the perfect example, we got a school in one area and the majority of the children in another area, and there's a lot of open space in between. There's been a safe routes to school operating for a long time, and we're actually looking at ways of making that more attractive to use during, sort of decent weather. It's got its attractions to kids crossing it anyway, but it's very unpleasant to sort of cross if the weather's bad and it's muddy and so on. And I'm sort of wondering whether there would be scope to perhaps run a bus or divert a service from an area, well, in this case, we're talking about the Bourne Estate, where there's a lot of children, to the area where their primary school is, or the majority of their school is, that would go round the outside. And, I don't know what the cost of running these things are, but it seems to me that when the weather's bad, that would be one way that people might actually start automatically thinking, oh, well, if we can't, the weather's not so good, if we can't walk today, we'll go and get the bus. And the two areas aren't actually linked directly by a bus at the moment, but there is a subsidised bus that kind of covers the area in 3 different services. The number 7, the A, B, and the C, and the A covers outside the school, and the B almost covers where a lot of the pupils come from. But I'm kind of wondering whether there's something that could be done with existing services. It might mean a bid to get additional funding for it, but it sort of makes sense to me that if you've got a lot of pupils in one place and a school in another place, if you can actually link the two, Obviously, the best option is the safe route to school, but you know, sort of that is fair weather friendly sort of thing. But
So shall we see if we can get an answer for that? Can find the question.
Yeah, so I guess that as always, funding comes into it because we basically every bus we have out is doing some work. So I think maybe in the more older days, I'd say, where you had often a bus would maybe do school in the morning, it would sit during the day, kind of doing nothing, and then it would go out and do an afternoon run. We, in our efficient way now, basically use all our vehicles who then operate at school to then go and do network work, and then they do a school in the afternoon. And so in that sense, if we did divert something, the risk with diverting services too much is you slow them right down, and that then puts off. If it was a specific school bus, that would be a different argument. But if you're taking a network bus down lots of rabbit warrens, essentially, you risk then diluting the product and losing customers because they won't want to sit on a bus that's doing another 15 minutes. So what we found generally is that, you know, the key things for bus travel is, does it turn up regularly and reliably, and how quick does it get me there? I mean, they're the two things that really people care about. So if we're not careful, we end up running a bus down too many side roads. A, we obviously can't serve them all because of the width of them, but B, we end up slowing it down so much that nobody wants to use it because it takes too long. So, you know, specific school routes we can look at if there was a demand for it and the funding for it. But I think in terms of network, we'd be wary of taking too much out unless there was a genuine need, demand, and resource. And if there was, and it was put to us that way, then we could definitely explore it, because we're always looking to our network and trying to amend it and tweak it and make it more bus friendly and people friendly. Sorry, but I think we've got to be careful that we don't divert buses too much and then kind of defeat the object. But you know, we definitely want to be the solution in terms of getting cars off the road. So in terms, and buses, I think definitely play a big part in that and can play a bigger part in that. But we'd be careful about taking core network routes and making them go around lots of different turns to then delay them so much that everyone else who would use them gets put off, if that helps explain.
Yeah, if I can just sort of clarify, this is actually a subsidised bus that operates off peak. Basically starts at 9:30 in the morning, finishes at 4:30 in the afternoon. So actually a slight tweak would make the afternoon one sort of effective, but there isn't a morning option. But there isn't a commercial route or a network route operating at that time, and the rest of the service is subsidised. But it's something that perhaps perhaps ought to have an email chat with you about at some point.
I was just going to actually suggest that, because this sounds as though we're departing a little bit from the main topic.
It's a bit specific.
So I'm just going to suggest that, because it's a really specific case, that you take that offline, and if you've got a case for a particular change in a bus route, that you discuss that outside the committee. But yeah, that's great, and thank you very much for your answers, Mike. Has anyone else got any questions for Mike? If not, we will carry on. So what I'm going to do now, we're getting a little bit short of time, so I'm going to ask all of the portfolio holders and the officers to make their comments, and then we're going to do questions. In fact, then I think we'll do the recommendations, and then if people have got other questions, we'll take those as part of the debate rather than having questions after each person. But I thought it made sense to do the questions for our guests first. Okay, so thank you to you, Mike. You're very welcome to stay if you want to and listen to the rest of the debate, or even come into it later. But you're very welcome to go if you've got other things that you need to do.
Thank you. I've got meetings to go to, so I will press on.
No problem. Thank you for attending.
Thank you for listening.
Now, if we could move on to the portfolio holders, Councillor Herritt.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be quite brief. I think school parking is one of the top topics in my inbox, not only as a ward councillor, but as a portfolio holder. But the challenge that we've got is with about 55 officers on the books, as it were, at a point in time on a shift basis, we're kind of looking at about 15 on duty, 15 to 20 on duty around school hours. Start of school and at the end of school. And given that it was interesting what the head teacher said there about how behaviour has changed post-COVID. Our officers experience that too, in that people are more aggressive towards them. We do have officers that are physically and verbally assaulted on duty, and you know that's it's a really tough job to go and do. But I think we've probably heard how important that is to the safety around schools. We have over 100 schools in the BCP area. I'm sure Councillor Burton will tell me exactly how many there are at some point. But yeah, it's a really tough area to enforce. School streets are one of the areas we've made some real progress. But for schools, finding volunteers is tough, and giving volunteers that authority and that really difficult space of telling their peers essentially to not do something. And you only really get that authority with the school staff, and school budgets are stretched, and they're trying to provide after school facilities, breakfast clubs, and all sorts of stuff like that at the same time as manning that barrier. So that's a difficult place for them. But yeah, I think I'm certainly kind of here to listen, see what else we can find, and be pleased to hear from the committee.
Thank you very much. Councillor Burton.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yeah, 117, I believe, but soon to go back up to 118 to answer Councillor Herriott. Yeah, I mean, it's been really interesting to listen to this. I've had quite a lot of experience around this, being a former teacher, having spent time on duty outside schools, also volunteering as a crossing attendant outside my local school until the sort of last year. So I've seen it quite up close and personal. A couple of things to note. It's definitely not the children and young people who are causing this problem. I'd also like to say, yeah, it was really interesting listening to Rachel, and I know schools try to do quite a lot outside their schools to help this situation, but it isn't actually directly the school's responsibility. And I think we need to be careful not to put too much responsibility onto schools, because I know a lot of residents do feel it is the school's responsibility. Teachers have got a lot to do before and after school, and they have the same issues talking to parents as our enforcement officers, except worse, because of course they have no jurisdiction over parking outside the school. All they're relying on is persuading parents. It is an issue which I'm hearing more of. In my ward, you know, I've seen it quite up and personal, although it isn't particularly bad in outside the school I was at. Although strangely enough, when I saw enforcement officers come at the start and the end of the day occasionally, on the rota. I've seen a strange effect of enforcement officers being there and parents therefore parking in a bus stop to ask why they were there, which was an interesting conversation to see. So, I mean, there's nothing really more to add to that, unless anybody's got any questions.
Okay, Councillor Hadley, would you like to add anything?
Thank you. Yes, Chair. Yeah, so we recognise this is a really challenging area. I guess in terms of the money that we have available to try and improve it, things like school streets, it's really very small. We have a capital budget for the year, which will be set at or finalised at full council tomorrow, of £10 million, but 70% of that goes on maintenance. And the sum that's there for specifically school streets is 50,000 across the whole of BCP. You've just heard that's 117 schools. So obviously we can only do a couple per year on that. But the other really important thing for me is that it's not just about the immediately outside the school. It's about the school journey. It's about how, you know, if we're going to persuade some families, for some children to be able to get to school independently, walking, scooting or cycling, then it's about how do we make it safe for them to travel. And this bit about the way in which people are behaving on the road in cars includes just not stopping at zebra crossings and all sorts of other things, not just at school gate, but on that journey, which makes it more difficult for us to then persuade the families to feel safe to let them travel independently, and that's a real challenge. So we have managed to get two. What is it? Where's it down? over £2 million from Active Travel England to support active journeys, and a significant part of that is about thinking about the school trip, safer routes to school. There are a couple of key junctions that we're looking at for that money, but there's also some work around working with on the student experience for 3 particular schools areas, and we picked the biggest ones. So it's Poole High School, it's the schools around East Way, of which there's 5 or 6 of them, and there's Twynham School in Christchurch, and just trying to work very actively with the schools in terms of plotting the journeys, understanding where from the students where they perceive the dangers to be, and helping to find solutions to those things, and also education and training for the students. But as we heard from the head teacher, it's the education of the parents that actually is the challenge, that it creates more danger in terms of getting their own child to school in their vehicle and endangering anyone who's outside the vehicle, and that is a real challenge. I'm not sure that pavement parking ban will help enormously, because often the way in which schools are, they're on down quite small roads, and so it just makes the passage of anyone going down the road even more difficult if the parents are not parking on the pavements. Why they do it, but it's not right that they squeeze the space for families on foot. So yeah, lots of problems. We are working as we can to solutions. I'm again interested to hear what the committee might come up with, and happy to answer any questions.
Hey, thank you very much. Can I ask Amanda, Barry, or Helen Taverner, or both of you, would you like to add something?
Hi, those that don't know me, I'm Helen Taverner. I am the head of parking for BCP Council. As everybody has already said, enforcing parking contraventions outside and near to schools is very difficult. It's not easy for lots and lots of reasons. I'm not going to do a big spiel. I know there's going to be lots of questions. I am more than happy to answer those questions. The 3 E's are the pinnacle though, and they've all been mentioned tonight, and that's education, engineering, and enforcement. And it's really important to note that enforcement is the last E. We should try to educate. If we can't educate, we engineer. And if the engineering fails as well, or doesn't fail, that's the wrong word. If that doesn't get the message, then we enforce. So enforcement isn't something we go out to try and make lots of money at. It's not something we like to do, but sometimes it is the only way that we can make people understand. It does link to so many other strands though. We've talked lots about people just not really caring, about them not changing their behaviour. There's lots of reasons for that. We can go into those, but I won't now because we are quite short on time. One of the things that was mentioned, and I think it's one of the recommendations that Councillor Rice has already said, is about us pulling together a document that educates people on what they can and can't do on the existing restrictions outside and near to schools, because a lot of schools already have the restrictions they need. People just do not understand what they can and can't do. So I'm more than happy to answer questions on that as we go. Thank you.
Okay. I'm just thinking about whether we should have questions first, or whether we should hear what the recommendations that you were thinking of were. I think we'll go for hearing the rapporteur's recommendations, because then when we're asking questions and debating this, we can be either adding to them or disagreeing or agreeing with them, and then that should mean that we can end up with something that we can agree at the end of the debate. So if you'd like to yes, can we have the recommendations next, I think?
Thank you, Chair. Could I very quickly ask you a question, because I'm sure it was you that said this. What's government's best practice? I'm sure you made that comment, government's best practice. I could be wrong, but I'm sure I heard that said. So I was just wondering, what is government's best practice?
I think that you mentioned, I think somebody mentioned that the parking enforcement officers were using best practice. It wasn't me, but somebody definitely said it. And I think that was part of something that you had. I think maybe it was Councillor Rice. Yes. So I think that was about the enforcement, that they were using the best practice.
Thank you. I wasn't sure who.
Go ahead.
Okay then. So the outcomes. Please add Felicity as well. So we agreed, as in our work, communications comms team from parking enforcement team to all schools and councillors around the general guidance and limitations of parking enforcement officers with contact details. This will enable staff at schools to engage well with enforcement officers and make effective use of the service and understand limitations, especially important when approached by parents about perceived lack of enforcement.
Okay, that's number one. Yep. Okay.
A corporate comms campaign to be organised through Safer Routes to School team regarding the emphasis on enforcement going forwards. This will be linked with schools and police.
So this is about safer routes. Yep. Okay, good.
And to recommend that cabinet member writes to MHCLG, which I have written down because we don't do acronyms all the time, do we?
Minister of Housing.
Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. Sorry, I scribbled it really quick.
That's okay.
Emphasising the need to increase fines to help with dangerous parking outside schools. And this is a separate issue from the high tourist number issues that is often referred to when asking for increased fines. So that is totally separate.
Yep.
And it needs clarification action. Review of any free resources available to schools to share with parents to create a shift in parent driving behaviour.
So that's a review of what schools are doing, so that
because as we've heard, some schools are actively, but some aren't as.
Yep.
So it's okay. I'll leave it there. Felicity, anything to add?
Yes, it was just one of the members of the Safer Routes to Schools team. They're linked in with the schools and the police quite a lot. And it was one of them that mentioned that they could have a look and see if there's any national free resources. So, for example, we do provide some training within schools about kids and road danger, but there isn't any provision of education to parents and drivers, and obviously they're the ones that are in control of a vehicle that can cause significant harm. And so it was about trying to see whether there's any, since we don't have much resource available to fund anything, it was to see whether there was anything free that was available.
Was that part of that recommendation for where you were looking to see what schools were doing and also looking to see what there is free out there as well? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So we have 4 different recommendations there. That's my understanding. Yes. Okay. Good. Okay. So we can add more recommendations as we go. Have you got some more, Councillor Rice?
Well, I was just going to separate out. There's in terms of parking enforcement, there is what the council parking enforcement can do, and be able to get some comms out for that, but also what can police enforcement do. And so it's a slightly different, but it's all about sharing that information with concerned parents. So sometimes,
so
for example, you can't take a photograph of poor parking and send that into the council. They're not legally able to do anything. But we needed to understand whether the police could. So that is why we had asked about them coming, but we had we weren't able to get them here for that. But we can agree that we would like to ask for that comms.
So are you adding that to the first recommendation, that we should be sending out comms, not just on what the enforcement officers can do, but also on what the police can do? Yeah?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so we've still got 4 recommendations. That's good. As I said, we can add whatever those as we go along. So who would like to speak? Right, let me write some names down.
Councillor Aikenhead, if I can just come back.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
I don't know if somebody from parking is in the room, in terms of clarifying the fines to help with dangerous parking outside schools. That may just be useful to get some clarification from them, just to clarify that point.
Okay.
Yep. So currently, The PCN levels are, there's two, it depends what you did. If you're parking generally on a yellow line, so be that a zigzag, a bus stop, a double yellow line, a single yellow line, etc., you can receive a maximum fine of £70. That is reduced to £35 if you pay it within the first 14 days. For other lower level parking offences, that might be parking somewhere where there is a parking bay but you didn't pay, or so on and so forth. That's a £50 fine, reduced to 25 if you pay within the first 14 days. So essentially, near a school, generally speaking, they will all be the £70 reduced to £35 in the first 14 days.
Thank you.
It is a question regarding parking enforcement. Very quickly then, so are you able to say how many tickets have been issued since September 25, so it's the school academic year, and how many tickets for parking on schools zigzags from September? And very quickly, if you don't have the data that reflects the parking violation, if it's not available, please would you be able to forward it? Because tracing would be quite helpful, as in how many and sorry, Miss Councillor Wright, did you say where does the money go?
Okay, so in order, I haven't got the numbers that you've just asked for in front of me. I can get them. It's very easy for us to see what we've got on a school zigzag. It would be more difficult to find outside every school because clearly that wouldn't be on a road by road basis, but we can look into what we can do about that. With regard to where the money goes, it is very, very specific about where income can go from PCNs. It's regulated by the Traffic Management Act 2004 and the Road Traffic Regulation Act. Section 55 tells us where we can spend it and where we can't spend it. It cannot be used to fund unrelated council services. It can only be used to cover enforcement costs and parking service costs, and where a surplus exists, can be used to improve public transport, parking and environmental related purposes.
So I think that it can be used in order to do some of the things that we might want to do through this. So that's a good thing. Okay, let me go through. I've got a list of names. Let's go for I've got you on the list. Okay, Councillor Canavan.
Yeah, I think we just need to be a bit careful about this first recommendation, because what we've heard this evening is that the attempt by schools to educate parents has not been terribly successful to date. Now, I don't have any problems about reminding parents what they can and can't do, but anything which highlights the limitation of parking enforcement officers seems to me to be completely counterproductive. Because frankly, they're going to say, well, if they ain't going to enforce it, we're just going to ignore it. So I can't see any benefit in doing that at all. But the other issue is this question of the police. So when I have had occasion to contact the police about parking issues, they have been absolutely clear with me that it is not their responsibility, and that responsibility for enforcement lies with the council. So we have to be really careful that we're just chasing our tails on something, which is not going to be terribly successful, because I just can't see the police being responsive to that kind of approach. But the other point I just wanted to raise is what we've heard from the head teacher is that what would significantly help is road markings, because what road markings do is two things. One is it makes it absolutely more visible for parents that there is a restriction in that area. But two, the markings then allows you to enforce. It allows you to give people a ticket. So without those markings, you're stymied because you can't enforce anything.
So people will continue to park on areas that are not marked or on pavements that are not marked. So the importance, I think, of improving our road markings around schools is critical because it does those two things, in my view.
Thank you. Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a huge list, but I'll try to sort of
condense it a little bit.
be picky from it. Yeah.
Yes. Just say a little bit about each one. A few words.
Well, I think I really want to emphasise one thing which will help. And at the moment, got all sorts of grief going on in my patch over an application just to readjust the way the school works. But over the next couple of years, there's going to be lots and lots of applications to increase the level of SEND provision within schools. And you know that's almost certainly going to involve more parents, more vehicles, and so on. And I think we need to think about it now. And I think the one thing which I think we could all agree with is that the parking on the zigzags in front of the school is a no-no. That's actually probably the easiest to enforce with cameras, but with every fresh application, I think there needs to be built into that application the need to cover the zigzag markings, and that would actually free parking wardens to look at the issues of people parking sort of inappropriately elsewhere. So I wonder whether that recommendation could be beefed up so that something is seen to be happening from it. The other thing is, and I was going to ask a question of the portfolio holder, but
which recommendation was it you were thinking should be beefed
well, it's the
up?
ongoing, the parking team are actively examining camera enforcement around schools. But I think that as that has a cost, that that needs to be something that's built into any future changes at schools, because if we're going to bring all special needs education within schools, which is I think what should be being done over the next couple of years, we need to have something that goes with it. There's lots of other things, but I'm wondering whether that would actually be cheaper than employing extra enforcement officers, whether that would help. And the other thing is some of the problem is that parents perceive their children to be in sort of danger if they don't pick them up immediately as at the end of the school day. And I'm kind of wondering whether there could be a system of, and I know it's difficult because it means more pressure on the schools, but for sort of holding groups of sort of children that can be picked up by their parents over a slightly longer period, sort of stretched over, quarter of an hour, 20 minutes or whatever, because that's the other thing, isn't it? It's the old diving at school to pick your little one up and beat everyone else to the illegal parking space so that you could be the first to pick your kid up sort of thing. I think there just needs to be some thought about that. And the other thing I think we should do is to have an audit of specific schools, maybe linked to schools where there's likely to be expansion, and using our transport advisory group, which we woefully underuse, to help with this. The fact that, sort of 9 out of 10 meetings are cancelled makes me think that we need to make use of those other 9 meetings and, I think get members involved in some of the detail, maybe, in their sort of particular areas. But I do think that having the cameras, the enforcement cameras as standard, I would love to see that priced up to see how that can be done with, because I am wary of the Operation Snap, because that straight away causes potential conflict between the person sort of using Operation Snap and taking photographs, and that adds to the potential conflict. Whereas a fixed camera, I think, actually is a more impersonal way of doing it. So that would be my number one recommendation, more so than some of the other ones there. And obviously, safe routes to school, well, that's an ongoing thing. We're looking at improving it in some places using better power.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Waters.
Thank you. Yeah, I think when we're looking at this as well, when we talk about enforcement outside of schools, the other thing we need to consider is enforcement outside of nurseries, because they face the exact same problems as schools mostly. And in fact, the children that are running around outside of them are a little bit less willing to act within the confines of what they're expected to do. So whatever recommendations we make, I think we make them towards all of our schools and our nurseries, not just our schools. Thank you.
Councillor Keddy.
Thank you, Chair. It's a really interesting set of statements up to this point, and I think this is an issue that affects all of our wards. I know that Queen's Park and Charminster has problems outside every single one of its schools, and we also host half of the East Way cluster of 7 schools. I'm particularly interested in one of the things that Councillor Herrick mentioned, that we have 15 to 20 enforcement officers around school time across the conurbation, and 117 schools. So we have around about 0.1 enforcement officers per school. I also note the comment from Helen in that there are a strict set of ways in which the money from enforcement can be spent. I think one of the obvious things to me, and maybe it's too obvious, without delving into it deeper, is can the enforcement revenue self-sustain and increase the number of enforcement officers available for school enforcement, and generally improve the service by increasing the number of on-the-ground officers? That's my first question. My second question would be, I'm interested, I take a great interest in Dorset Police sitting as chair of the Dorset Police and Crime Panel. I'll be interested in who the board have engaged with at Dorset Police in order to discuss some of these issues, whether that is Dorset Road Safe and Sergeant Leonard's team, or others, and I'm quite happy to help signpost and direct if that's useful. Finally, I note the comment about education, engineering and enforcement. One thing that I tried with one of my schools in Ward was asking the head teacher to send out a communication at the end of half terms and holidays, warning parents to park carefully, and then we backed that up with contacting enforcement officers to attend in the first week. So they get a communication from the school asking them to be considerate, not park over drives, not park on zigzags or double yellows. And then that is backed up by enforcement officers attending. And what I found with the enforcement officers is on their first attendance, they would educate, and on their second attendance, they would enforce and issue tickets. That seemed quite effective. I think I'll wrap it up there. There's a lot to talk of on this. Just one last very quick thing. Yellow zigzags are in the same fine category as yellow lines, as I understand it. I'm just minded of white zigzags, which cover 3 points and £100 fine. It's a shame there isn't something similar to that we could apply to yellow zigzags, because that is the worst of the infractions that I see. Thank you.
Thank you. There's some questions there, so anyone like to come back and answer them?
I was vigorously nodding at some of those. Why can't a fine be £100? I don't know. You tell me. Yeah, I would love that. So yeah, school zigzags are the same fine category, although are a slightly different contravention. A zigzag is no stopping, whereas a double yellow line or a single yellow line is no waiting. That means that you should never be on a zigzag, and we can issue an immediate PCN if you are on a zigzag. There's no observation period required, and it is one of the restrictions we are allowed to enforce with a camera. We cannot use a camera to enforce single or double yellow lines with or without loading bands. We used to be able to enforce the loading bands, but we've not been able to do that for many years now. So yes, there is subtle differences in what you can and can't do, but the fine levels are essentially the same.
Thank you. Councillor Wright. Councillor Kelly,
just
you wanted to come back?
the
Was there a
question
not
about
answered?
expanding the service based on
yes.
fine revenue, if possible.
Yeah, so obviously each year the budget is set and we can or can't do whatever it is that we can or can't do with that budget. At the moment, we are in a fortunate position of being fully resourced as it stands at the moment with the numbers that we are able to have within the structure that exists at the moment. It may be that as we continue to review the service to try and improve our ability to enforce that does grow. But yeah, we do what we can with the resource that we have. The idea of 0.1 of a civil enforcement officer attending each school is interesting. I cut some arms and legs off. But yeah, it is something that we do, and it's something we do really well. And it's interesting that the head teacher from Baden Powell School was on, because many, many years ago when we were Borough of Poole, we won a British Parking Award for the work that we did enforcing outside Baden Powell School. So we are good at this. It's just that, as people have said, behaviour has changed since COVID.
Sorry, Chair, can I just add, so we often have, as I spoke about earlier, we often have vacancies in that team as well, so it's not an easy job to fill. And there've been a couple of other notes on the fines. Last time out, I'm fairly sure I'll just keep coming back to this committee with parking items actually at the minute, but I think we spoke about the DFT PCN trial that we submitted, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit further on, but what that proves to us is that is an effective deterrent and does stop people from being so willing to illegally park. Yeah, and I would encourage us all to kind of get on board with that if we can. We've been lobbying ministers and MPs just in the last week at various events to try and see if we can kind of maintain the momentum of that, but we know it's an effective deterrent and we'd like to be able to do that more.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. You basically said exactly what I was going to say in your first point about the fines and things. I agree with what Patrick said about road markings. They've got to come first. Road markings come first, then we can do enforcement. 15 off parking officers doesn't sound, for this, conurbation this size doesn't sound very many to me. But if this is such a big problem and the fines can be used in-house to pay wages and things like that, then surely there's a scope there for expanding. If the amount of parking officers that we've got, if that's possible, if there's so much problem with parking around schools, there's so many fines that could be dished out, then there's an opportunity there, I would have thought. But thank you, Councillor Kelly. That's basically what I was going to say.
Councillor Northover.
I wondered if, sorry, I'm going to ask you a question. I wondered if can the schools or a group of schools be informed of the value of the fines around their school so that they can use that in newsletters and things like that? Yeah. I'm not sure now. I was going to say, could the value of the fines be used specifically then on something that can improve things for that school? So could it be used then for signage or markings? But I'm actually curious now to know if the parking civil enforcement guys are self-financing, or are they not? Because I assume that they are, and you can just keep getting more and more. But if that's not the case, I'm curious to know why.
So the civil enforcement officers that we have do all cover their costs. The parking service as a whole runs and it is self-financing, and there is a surplus left over. That surplus is dealt with through the budget setting process each year that is obviously signed up to by council. So I can't sit here now and say, yes, of course we can do that, because actually that needs to be done at that sort of cabinet council level of setting what's going on with that budget. We are always looking to improve the service, and if there is potential to employ more civil enforcement officers, I wouldn't be averse to that. But that, again, that is something that needs to be part of a much bigger conversation than just me saying, yes, I'd like to grow my service. And we can take that away and have a look at what we can do with that. I'm not entirely sure about whether we should let schools know what's happened directly outside their school, because as I say, the purpose of the Traffic Management Act is quite clear, and that feels like it's getting a bit targeted and a little bit too specific. It doesn't mean that we can't do a street by street basis analysis of what's happening, but it just feels, enforcement isn't something to be proud of, which is a strange thing to say as a head of parking service, but the winner should be the one with the least PCNs outside its school, not the most.
Could I just come back and just say, I suppose I'm thinking a bit like in my doctor's surgery, they get told how many patients have gone to A&E, and they're not proud of it, but they get told it, and then they sort of pass on this message to the patient saying, they've been too high, you need to be getting in contact with us, and things like that. Or they use it as a sort of almost like it's a warning more than something to be proud of.
I mean, I think it's something we can consider if the committee want to make that recommendation. But like Callum said, we kind of act within that framework, and I think it would have to be considered within that. But that doesn't mean that we can't have a good look at it.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple of questions. First of all, I just wanted to ask, in terms of the enforcement officers, is there any scope for changing shifts at any stage? I know that's a difficult thing to do because people are used to their shifts, but is there any possibility that you could get a higher number of enforcement officers working at the particular times?
As it so happens, we are currently in the middle of consulting on changing the CEO rota, and one of the things that we are making sure is that we have the optimum number of CEOs. Given the whole number of CEOs we have at the moment, obviously that's not going to be lots, but it is about making sure that the optimum number available at specific times in the day, and some of those specific times are very definitely school drop-off and pick-up times.
Great, thank you very much. And I just wanted to ask for some clarification on one of the recommendations, especially because of what Councillor Canavan mentioned, a concern about that we didn't really want to be telling the parents what the limitations are of our parking officers that might encourage them to get around it and park badly in ways that we can't do anything about. But I just thought what I'd written down, that your recommendation wasn't to tell parents, but was to tell schools and counsellors. Am I right about that? Who are you suggesting telling about the limitations of enforcement?
The fundamentals is, if you understand what is, then, because it seems to be shifting to all others. So yes, I do agree. General guidance and limitations of parking enforcement. It's having that clear cut. Schools, I mean, I've written it down, so I've written it down here. But it's the police. The police don't do things. It's the council. The school can't do this. So it is that fundamental understanding. This is your remit. This is your remit. This is your remit. But I'm trying to think now. Felicity, help me out here, please.
So who are you recommending that we tell this information to? That's what I'm asking.
I would say schools.
Schools.
Because
Yeah.
then the school, if schools are challenged by the parents, then the schools have got that information.
So it's making sure that the schools have the information of what the limitations are of enforcement, not that we're not the wider public. The schools, I think you mentioned maybe counsellors, that we understand it. Okay, that's good. Okay, any other comments or? Okay, yes, if you'd like to come forward.
There's a couple of people online as well, just
yes.
for your information.
Sorry, I haven't noticed that.
Thank you, Chair.
Including me.
Can I just ask? We've already had double yellow lines and including the curb markings outside schools. Can you assure me that when the enforcement officers come, and I understand they're it's stretched over all the schools we've got, that they don't educate people that are parked on these, because that is just sheer ignorance of the highway code, and you do fine them.
Yep. So as has been stated, we work to best practice that is dictated to us by government. We wouldn't want to work outside of that. If there is somebody sat in the vehicle when a CEO approaches it, the first thing they should do is ask them to move and explain to them why they are being asked to move. If they don't move, of course, a PCN will be issued. But if that person moves, we cannot issue a PCN at that stage.
Thank you. I don't think if they move, that's a problem. It's where they're parking there for, 20, 30 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Burton.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So you have moved on slightly from what I wanted to say, because I just want to pick something that Councillor Trent has said about special educational needs. I would just remind us that actually the vast majority of children with special educational needs are educated within schools currently. The white paper is saying that the direction of travel is likely to be that more of them get educated within mainstream schools. But of course there's a consultation out, so we don't know if that happens. There's likely to be less movement of children for such a large distance, therefore it might ease some of the traffic. However, Councillor Trent is quite right in saying that if this does happen, mainstream schools may well look to expand their facilities for special educational needs, which means planning applications will happen. And of course, residents are likely to oppose the planning applications due to parking and transport, which might well go against the direction of travel which SEND is going.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rice.
Yes, I just wonder whether Helen can clarify the point of how long a parking enforcement officer is able to observe somebody after asking them to leave. But it does link into sort of the educational aspect. So there was just so many questions that we had when we were in our meeting, and so this is why the recommendation is about education, understanding what parking enforcements are able to do. Now, particularly the head teachers and the school staff, whoever's on a gate and may get interactions with parents, but it can be, I don't have any opposition to the information being shared to parents as well, because it can be very frustrating as a parent to witness some poor parking or behaviour and then not see anything happen. Whereas if you understand what the regulations are, then you are able to interpret the situation more calmly. Councillor Canavan raised the issue that police are not able to do anything. So police with Operation SNAP are able to enforce on zigzags outside schools. So that's why we feel that it's important to provide education about what the police are able to do. And then road markings, it was suggested that it's so in terms of the education, engineering, and what was the last one? Enforcement. So we've got the educational aspect, and that has been there for sort of decades, really. And then in terms of engineering, putting in lines, we did discuss this in the meeting, but as far as I recall, there wasn't an easy solution. Most schools have the zigzags, and if Helen can clarify, I think there's a specific distance limitation in terms of where zigzags can go. So it can't be for a whole street. It has to be a certain distance from the actual main entrance, and it can't cover a second entrance potentially. So if we can get clarification on that. But otherwise, schools have double yellow lines or single yellow lines or zigzags, and so that's also not working. So necessarily. So I don't think, as far as I recall, that there was a viable suggestion for what we can do about lines. And then, so yes, so that sort of is where we got to in terms of just doing what we can with enforcement and public engagement.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, is there anyone else on my list to speak? Oh, Councillor Wade, yes.
Hello. I don't know if I'm right about this, but I suspect that maybe the correlation with post-COVID is cost of living, and just I'm not a parent myself, but just trying to think from that point of view. If you're looking at paying between £310 and £380 per term for a bus pass, you would have to be getting fined the £35 a go between 9 and 11 times per term for it to save money on getting your kid a bus pass instead of dropping them off. And then if you've got, you know, other considerations like multiple children or potentially reducing working hours, it just doesn't make economic sense for people to change their behaviour. And I think that is perhaps how some of this behaviour is driven. So it's just to put some numbers on that, really, in favour of we really need to increase these fines, because I think they're not a deterrent. It's just the cost of, you know, living your life at this stage. And of course, nobody is being fined that regularly. And if you are not buying a specific school bus pass and you're just the general network one, that's £205 for 90 days, £700, you know, a year. So you see how high the and how regular the fines would need to be for it to make economic sense for people to change their behaviour.
Thank you very much. I think that's a really valuable point, and I was noticing that we don't have any recommendations yet that talk about buses, and I must admit I wonder myself whether it's, although obviously it's one thing is to increase enforcement, another thing would be to try and make the bus travel cheaper somehow, if there was any way we could do that. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. Yeah, just on the comment just raised there by Councillor Waite, that kind of assumes that there's no other costs involved in running a car, which there are, and also that walking, scooting, or cycling isn't an option, which is much cheaper. So if people, you know, really don't have the money, do they have the money to run a car? In some cases, they don't. I think one of the challenges for this is about the distance and the fact that with choice of school, that people are travelling longer distances than they used to. In terms of getting the kids to school and then going on elsewhere, but that must be balanced by some people who are now working from home or have opportunity for flexible working, which allows them to do the school run on foot with their children. So I think there is scope for looking at modal shift. It is about how do we encourage people, persuade them that these options exist and that it's safer to do so.
Thank you. I just actually wanted to bring in our officers about we have spoken a little bit about why we think people may be having the change of behaviour. And I realised at the beginning there was some comments that you didn't have time to say about that. And I wondered if you would like to just make a few comments on any reasons that you might have come across that people might have changed their behaviour.
I'm not in a position to comment on why people are or aren't changing their behaviour. We've observed it, but as to why it's not my domain.
Okay, that's no problem then. What I want to do now is really come back to the recommendations, because what we need to decide is which ones we are going to go forward and recommend. So I don't think we've really got a total agreement on them. So I think that I'm just going to need to go through them just one at a time and just check out if it's something that we're happy with or not. So the first recommendation was the one about communicating about the limitations of enforcement, and when it should be the police and when it should be the enforcement officers. There wasn't total agreement on that, because Councillor Rice was keen for it to be education to parents as well, and Councillor Canavan was concerned about that, as it might encourage parents to try and get around the rules. I'd just like to try and gauge up what the feeling of the meeting is on that. No, there's nobody up there with a hand up. Councillor Rush, she hasn't got a hand up now.
I did have my hand up.
Oh. Do you want to speak?
Sorry, I took it down again. Yeah.
Yes, go ahead. Please go ahead.
Sorry, it was on a slightly different point, but yes, it's mostly, I don't mind whether the information publicly gets sent out to all parents, but we may have interested parents that want the same information that's given to the head teachers, and I certainly wouldn't want them to be restricted.
Yeah.
Yes, no, my other point was just to clarify with Helen about, because it was raised during the discussion about surely there's something we can do with lines. As far as I understood, there wasn't. So it was just to hear from Helen about that, check that doesn't need to be in the recommendation, that we extend all zigzags, sort of double the length of zigzags, for example.
Can we just do them one at a time for the moment, if that's okay? Because then we can get them agreed. So I think what we're saying there is that the first recommendation is that we make communications to schools, and to make sure that schools and counsellors are aware of the limitations of enforcement, and what's the responsibility of the police, what's the responsibility of the council, so that the schools and counsellors can understand it. And we're not putting any restrictions on how they share that, but we're not particularly ourselves. This is about educating the schools and counsellors. Are we happy with that, Councillor Waters?
Just can we change the language to schools, nurseries, and counsellors?
Yes. Okay. Yes. If everyone's happy with that. Is everyone happy with that? Can we do by consensus?
May I just make a small point, and that is that what the police are able to do as opposed to what they choose to do are two different things. And as Councillor Keddy commented, I rather similar to Councillor Canavan, I actually got in touch with our liaison officer and said, and asked them about what happens at the school gates, specifically that in my patch. And they said this was, I think the words they used was, this is not something we would choose to attend.
Okay.
So I think we have to be careful about that.
I think we will, if we're recommending that this is done, I think that we're recommending, I think that the people who end up doing it can take that into account, if it's accepted, because I guess I would imagine that what we're doing here is recommending to Cabinet this is done. Cabinet will decide if it's going to be done, and if they decide yes, then the officers will carry it out, and I'm sure that they will use some good sense when they're doing it. Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor
Educational settings.
Yeah, that's fine. Educational settings. And about what? Yes, whose responsibility? And yes, education.
Can I just read out?
Go ahead, read out the wording.
Sorry, I was just going to clarify that I was going to suggest that all the recommendations are made to the relevant portfolio holders, but if you would prefer to make it to cabinet, that's obviously fine. So it's just what the board
I'm
prefer,
fine. We could. The trouble is knowing who the relevant portfolio holder is when there's quite a bit of overlap between the different. Some of the recommendations might be to slightly different. So if we recommend to, Councillor Herrick, would you prefer that we recommend to portfolio holder, or would you prefer that we recommend to cabinet?
I think we'd be pleased to take that as a cabinet and consider it. I think the process is that it would come to we'll probably come to cabinet on Thursday, and then but we will probably consider it, and then before responding formally at some point.
And I'm sure the cabinet could delegate it to the portfolio holder if they feel that's the right thing to do. Okay, especially because there's so much overlap with the different areas. Okay, so
that's fine. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, can I just read out the wording for the first one then? So I've got recommend to cabinet that it asks the parking enforcement team to circulate information to all educational settings and councillors around the general guidance, limitations and responsibilities of parking enforcement officers and the police, including suitable contact details. Is that okay?
Is everyone happy with that? Can you do that?
So the wording I've got for that is that a communications campaign be organised through Safer Routes to School team regarding an emphasis on enforcement going forwards. And then there was a suggestion made during debate that this possibly includes consideration of using specific information related to schools, e.g. levels of fines in a certain area.
Your mic is not on.
Sorry, can I just ask, we would like the fines to increase as a council. We would like the instances in which we issue those fines to decrease.
Yes.
So the amount of PCNs to decrease. Obviously
the number of
the number of
the number, not the amount of money.
Not the amount of money.
The number. So if that's fine, we've got the about the amounts increasing is the next one. That's the next recommendation that we're coming to. So
sorry to interrupt. Yeah,
is everyone happy with that one, or do you want it read out again?
Please read it out. Yeah, it wasn't available online. The sound went.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, so it was that a communications campaign be organised through Safer Routes to School team regarding an emphasis on enforcement going forwards. And it was suggested that this includes consideration of using specific information related to school areas, including the level of fines, to encourage a decrease in the levels of parking infringements.
Yeah, and then yeah. Yes.
Can you take out schools and put educational
establishments? Is everyone happy with that? Okay. So our next recommendation is that Cabinet writes to MHCLG, emphasising that fines should increase. Councillor Herrick.
Sorry for clarification. It's the DFT that control that, not MHCLG.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much for that. So, Cabinet writes to DFT to emphasising that we would like to be able to we'd like fines to increase. Does that make sense? Yeah, everyone happy with that? Okay, that one's an easy one. The next one was about reviewing what schools are doing and sharing it and looking for free national resources. Have you got some wording for that one?
Yes, I've got it's for Cabinet to ask the Safer Routes to Schools team to review if there are any free resources available for schools to share with parents to help create a shift in parent driving behaviour.
Mm-hmm. And does that cover what you were? Does that cover it?
I'll just make the last comment because it was ongoing. Parking team actively examining camera enforcement around schools, because obviously that was due to funding.
So camera enforcement, was that part of the same?
Well, we've got it down as ongoing, but let's get it this way. If we get these in line, we may not need to go that far, but any.
So should we have that one as a separate one than the looking for so the one that's just been read out about looking for the free national resources, we can all agree that one, can we? And we do the camera one afterwards. Okay, who wants to speak on the looking for the national resources? Who is first? I think Tony Trent was first. I wanted to speak about camera. Okay, that's next. That's in a minute. Yeah. Okay, so Councillor Keddy.
I'm just conscious that with my police and crime hat on, there's a commitment within the Dorset Police and Crime Plan to support and promote educational road safety schemes. I'm also mindful that the Police and Crime Commissioner is running the Op Relentless Grant Fund at the moment, which is for combating various types of antisocial behaviour. If this was found to be upholding an element or strand of the police and crime plan, I don't see why some grant funding couldn't potentially be allocated towards this, and maybe it could be considered as one of the approaches for free or supporting schemes.
Can we put in including exploring whether this fund can be used as well? What was it called again?
Op Relentless.
Op Relentless. Yeah. Whether, because it sounds as though there is antisocial behaviour going on. So
yeah, that's my thought.
Excellent. So if we put that in, that's useful. Okay. Is everyone happy with that? Don't need it read out. Okay, that's great. Okay, let's go on to cameras then. Yes. I think we heard something that cameras are only useful against zigzags. Is that correct? What was the proposal about cameras, and is it still relevant given that it only works for zigzags? Can I just ask the person, the Councillor Macro or Rice first? Do you want more cameras?
This was more a comment to say really the parking team are looking at this, and it's just a acknowledgement that we support that the parking team continue to actively look for opportunities to apply for funding to increase the use of camera enforcement. So this also relates to school streets, for example. We heard from the head teacher that it's very difficult to get staff or volunteers to run a school street, whereas you can use a camera for that. I agree, we heard that they couldn't use them necessarily for parking on double yellow lines or that type of thing, but it was sort of just an emphasis of we can't rely on volunteers to enforce road safety around schools, and that we need to be continuing the good work of looking at what possibilities are out there.
Okay, so did you get some wording around the good work that's already being done to explore increase of use of cameras? And also, I think I'd like to add something to that, because we also were saying quite a lot of things and hearing that we needed more enforcement, and we were also hearing that the parking team are doing something about looking at the shifts to try and increase enforcement. So we could add that to it as well and say that we support the work that's being done to increase enforcement through getting the best balance of shifts. don't think that's too controversial. There's a couple of people. There's Councillor Trent wants to speak first. Councillor Trent.
Yeah, Chair. I don't know sort of whether I got it wrong, but I got the impression that the colour that the zigzags marked in makes a big difference to how easy it is to enforce, in which case we should aim to have all of the zigzag markings by schools standardised to the one that's the easiest to enforce. And just really emphasising again that that is the biggest single easily enforceable thing outside schools is the zigzag markings, and that this is putting a fixed camera there. Actually, if we get more patrols, it enables them to actually look at some of the inconsiderate parking outside the zigzag area. So I think it's a double win, but I think that ought to be a priority, and maybe an advisory on any future applications that increase the use of any school site. So, you know, I think that's a win-win, and we ought to pursue that in whatever way we can.
Thank you. I'm just minded of when I've looked at CCTV to deal with antisocial behaviour and some of the barriers I came up against. A single CCTV, well, if this would be operated by the BCP CCTV team, that's a lot of acronyms.
Just to clarify, when Helen earlier, my name's Richard Pincroft, by the way, Head of Transport, Sustainable Travel, she was referring to the fact it was a zebra crossing zigzag or a pedestrian crossing zigzag. So you have a yellow zigzag outside of schools, you have a white zigzag when you have a pedestrian crossing. So Helen was referring to the fact that you can enforce on one with a camera, but you can't with the other, you know, or but the PCN level, if somebody parks on a zigzag for a pedestrian crossing, is obviously a very high level. If it's on a zigzag outside of school, we obviously need a CCTV camera to do it. If it's on a zigzag on a crossing, the PCN is just immediate. That's right. So it's really about the nuances. It's not about what colour we paint it. It's about the type of traffic regulation order that it is, in which instance it's used. Is that clarified?
Yes. Councillor, I'll take Councillor Rice first. Okay.
I was just going to mention about CCTV.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Do that first, then.
Okay, thank you. If we are looking at covering yellow zigzags, we are still talking about enforcement via CCTV on yellow zigzags rather than just the white crossing zigzag.
If we're using cameras outside of schools, they would be cameras that are pointing at the yellow zigzags.
Okay, I appreciate the clarity. Just as a point, when I've looked into CCTV, a single placement can be £6,000 plus another £2,000 a year to monitor. There's currently, as I understand it, from the Head of Public Protection, not enough capacity in the CCTV control centre to easily bring in more. If we're talking about 100 sites, the funding and capacity issues get quite dramatic. I'd be interested to know if that would be covered under active travel or how it would be sourced. Thank you.
So just to be really clear, any cameras that we deploy for enforcement are not monitored through that team. They are an enforcement camera. They're a different type of camera. They're also more expensive than the cameras you've just mentioned because they are approved type devices for enforcement. And this is why we have to be really careful about where we place them. They also can only see in a straight line. So if the zigzag goes around a corner, that's more than one camera potentially, or there's a dead spot on that zigzag. So there's lots of things to consider, but those cameras can be moved. So for example, if we secured funding to buy 10 cameras outside of schools, those cameras can be moved at different times between different schools, so we could cover more with those. I would also need to be employing people to create the evidence packs that those cameras produce. However, it's not monitored in the same way that your CCTV camera in the public protection spaces it only records when an offence is committed and so forth. They are only reviewed when that evidence is put forward. So it's not the same kind of level that you're thinking.
I really appreciate the clarification there. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. That's helpful. Councillor Rice.
I just want to check that we're not missing a very simple recommendation. So if we can get clarification from Helen or Richard in terms of being able to implement some additional lines around schools that would solve our problems. If we can get clarification that there isn't a simple fix with regards to those, as far as I'm aware.
Councillor Rice, is this to do with cameras? Because we'll talk about.
Oh, I thought we'd finished with the cameras.
No, we
Sorry.
haven't finished with the cameras. I'll bring you in a minute. So, Councillor Herrick, did you want to talk about cameras?
I was going to explain the difference between the white zigzags and the yellow zigzags, but I think we've done that.
You don't need to now. Yeah, we're fine. Okay, right. So what we're doing, because we know the parking team are looking at this, is we are just agreeing with what they're already doing. Is everyone happy with the recommendation that we support what they're already doing on trying to increase the number of cameras and also making sure that the right number of people are on shift? Are we happy with that? Yep. Okay, good. Let's talk about road markings then, because there'd been quite a lot of talk about road markings, and I think that perhaps we should have a recommendation about reviewing the road markings around schools and making sure that they are optimum for what is needed. Anyone wish to talk on that at all? Yes, Councillor Mack.
And as Councillor Waters has mentioned, outside nurseries.
Okay.
Because there are nurseries.
Yes. So that's a fairly simple.
There are nurseries that don't.
So what I'm asking is for it to be
in my ward that would
review
one.
Because we heard from the person who came to talk to us from a school that's the number one thing that she wanted, and it may be different in different schools. So okay, does everyone agree with that? Do you want to read out? Oh, Councillor Hadley.
Yeah, a couple of things. So that the maximum length, I believe, that you can do a zigzag for is 43 meters, 43.5 meters. But there is something here about parents will need to be able to stop somewhere, and we can't cover all of the ground outside the school with zigzags. If actually, that's the only place that they can sensibly stop. So there's always going to be a balance in terms of what the teams come up with. The other issue, I'd just be grateful if I don't know whether Richard can help with. I don't know whether we can put a school marking outside a nursery, because is that actually covered under the legislation? Thank you.
Good point. Does anyone know the answer to that?
I'll have to take that one away. I've got a sneaking suspicion that they aren't covered though. But we shall see.
So if that's something that can be looked into, we can still make a recommendation that there's a review of the markings outside educational establishments, and if you find out you can't do anything outside nurseries, then that's how it is. Okay.
I think because a lot of them are obviously private and businesses and set up, so they're not.
Is everyone happy with that? There's a recommendation. Okay. Oh, Councillor Canavan.
I just think we need to be clear about what the constraints are, because there's been some intimation that there are constraints about, applying more zigzags around schools. So I want to understand if there are constraints, and if not, why we can't have more of them.
Someone want to answer that, Councillor Herrick?
I think if the committee want to make that as a recommendation to be examined, what we would do is obviously examine that and then come back with an answer as to why that's potentially not possible, having all the information to hand from Richard Pincroft's team and what the options are within that. So I think it's okay for the committee to recommend that, so long as they're not upset if it's impossible.
Yes, and also
sorry, can I just for clarity, what I have written down for that is that to review educational settings to ensure that the most appropriate road markings are in place. So it's very broad at the moment. So I just
Yes, and I think that what we would expect is that obviously if you came back and found some schools didn't have the right road markings, or road markings could be better around those schools, there's also thinking about consulting local residents as well and making sure that we're not just doing something without talking to people. But I think to start off with, all we're asking for is that it's reviewed and that some recommendations are produced, and it may be that for one school you can do something and for another school you can't.
Yeah, and I think this would have to be examined within existing budgets as part of the Safer Routes to School programme or something like that. So I don't think there's a really quick solution here, because I think doing it on a whole scale basis immediately would probably be a lot more money than we have available. But I think it's a sensible thing to look at.
Okay, so is everyone happy with that? Rich.
I'm possibly doing myself out of looking really good in front of you in a few months' time, but we are actually actively doing this at the moment already. Just to assure you, we are reviewing all the schools and BCP at what restrictions they have outside.
In that case, we are supporting the work you're already doing. And we can write that in our recommendation. Yes, we support the work that you're already doing to do this, but it's good to know that we support what you're already doing. Excellent. Okay, I'm just looking to see if there were any more things that we wanted to make recommendations about. One of the things I noticed was that there was some talk of planning, but I'm not sure there's anything that we can recommend around that, because when a planning application comes, we respond to it at the time. Unless anyone wants to make a particular recommendation. There was also some mention of the Transport Advisory Group and whether they should get involved or anything. Again, I'm not hearing a specific recommendation unless anyone wants to make one. And also, I note we haven't yet made any recommendations about buses, and where anyone wants to, if there's anything we can recommend on that.
Not part of the remit of the board.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So maybe that would be straying out of our remit, and so unless we wanted to say something to send it over to the Environment Committee, there isn't. So I think we've kind of covered everything. So I'm just going to ask whether there's anything that you think we haven't covered in terms of the debate, recommendations, any other recommendations that anyone wants to suggest.
Sue.
Councillor Rice.
Thank you. Just on the planning application aspect, the specific recommendation would be around if there is any change to a school or like a planning application for a school, that the Safer Routes to Schools team or the appropriate team are notified and asked for a response. The issue arises when these planning applications go through and the Safer Routes to Schools team aren't aware of it, you see, because they're not able to keep track of everything, obviously. So it would just be around a recommendation asking them to be advised that this is happening so that they can future-proof for a school street, for example, if required, if appropriate.
Excellent. So that's a good recommendation. So that we, if you've got that down.
So I've got down that when planning applications are submitted, the Safer Routes to School teams be informed.
Yes. Okay. So does everyone agree with that? Okay. Good. Excellent. So I don't think there's anything else unless anyone else wants to make any other recommendations. Okay, in that case, I'm going to have a quick look at the time and think let's have a quick comfort break. Yeah. Yes, please do.
I'd like to thank the board for taking so much time over this, because it is an important issue.
Very important.
And it did need our full attention previously, but hey, we're here now, and I thank you all for being engaging and coming up with positive solutions, and our children are front and centre. That's it.
Thank you very much. Right, quick break. Good. I think we're back on air. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're now going to go on to talk about parking problems in high season, and we had a KLOE document where we had some questions which were compiled, and we've now got a report with the answers to these questions. So I'm going to I'm just to start off with, I'm just going to ask the Democratic Services Officer to clarify some issues around van life, because this is something that is the remit of the Environment and Place Committee. But I'm happy for people to say things at the committee that they feel they need to say, but just bear in mind that we don't have a remit to change things that are not within our area. Okay, so if you want to say your...
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to clarify, because we had some sort of communications around it, and there appeared to be a little bit of confusion on the purpose of this committee and the purpose of what Environment and Place is doing. And although the report does touch upon issues related to people living in vehicles, that's obviously not the primary focus of the report. But Environment and Place Committee are currently undertaking a more in-depth piece of work, and they have a survey at the moment, and they are currently seeking views from people who are living in vehicles to help gather some more information around that, and to better inform the committee to take that matter forward. So if you were aware of anybody who is in that situation, if you could encourage them to respond to the survey, that would be most appreciated. Thank you.
And I would like to say that when we consider this, although the recommendation says just to note the report, I would expect that we would be thinking about how we can actually do something a bit more than just noting the report. So I'd like us to be thinking about what we can feed into the parking strategy from this. So if there are things at the end of the debate that we want to agree that we're going to feed into the parking strategy, that's great. Just to watch out for when we're talking about some of the issues around people who are sleeping in their vehicles, just to watch out for what the remit of this committee is and be respectful of that. Okay, thank you. So let me hand over to Councillor Herrick. We have the chair of the Environment and Place Committee here, and Councillor Canavan wanted to speak as well. Yeah, okay. If that's fine, go ahead. I just wondered if you wanted to give me a little Environment and Place, so you know where things are up to. Okay, I'll tell you what though, let's have that after we've had Councillor Herrick give his general talk on this, and then we will take your update as well. That would actually be really helpful, because then we can try and make sure what we're doing is fitting in with what you're doing, rather than in any way conflicting with it. Who else was indicating? Councillor Canavan. That's very helpful. Thank you very much. Councillor Farquhar, are you happy to wait till we start the debate as well? That's great. Okay, so what we're going to do is hear from Councillor Herrick first, then we're going to hear from the chair of the Environment and Place Committee and about the work that they're doing, and then we'll go into the general debate, and I will include you, Councillor Farquhar, as well, about these different there's quite a few different questions here. I'm not going to take them one at a time. What we'll do is we'll just have people generally debating things, and then after we've had a bit of debate, people might feel they want to suggest things as recommendations, and I'm, as I said before, recommending that what we do is feed things into the parking strategy. That's okay. So if I'll just hand over to Councillor Herritt to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully going to be brief and leave room for questions. We're going to get to a lot of acronyms this evening, so if you don't know what the acronyms are, please do ask. I think we've probably covered quite a lot of them already in the previous item, but even the government views parking as quite complex, and as we've spoken about already, the DFT and MHCLG actually look after different aspects of parking, with the DFT dealing with on-street and MHCLG dealing with off-street. The paper's been written in response to the key lines of inquiry written by this committee following the motion on parking that passed through council last September. We have, as we've already covered, Richard, Helen and Amanda in the room, with Wendy online as well, with Councillor Hadley as the other part of the transport remit. I say the other part, the main part of the transport remit to do this. And I'm hopefully just going to go through some of the overall positions at the outset before we kind of come back to those questions. So on the analysis that you asked for of the consultation from last summer, that is still not complete from the parking team, as they've been prioritising other work. We spoke earlier about the really significant DFT report that we sent off not that long ago, but as you'll be able to see from the document, there was a very significant response from the public to that, and we'll be happy to come back at the appropriate time to the committee and discuss as we kind of get there. The viability of park and ride scheme is one that we talk about on a not irregular basis. Obviously this report does cover that, and some of the experiences down the years of trialling them. Parking restrictions along the Overcliff, like in Boscombe, I think it's very revealing as to the complexities of dealing with this, because even in places where sleeping isn't allowed, quite often the only way to test that is to wake people up and then they're awake and not asleep anymore. Which means that that becomes a different challenge. And a lot of the issues that there are here already have the ability to be enforced against as well. The PSPO mentioned in section 20, taking care of a lot of the antisocial elements of some of the parking we see on the Overcliff. Underused and vacant land has been assessed. There is not that much that's in proximity to the car parks, and we know very well from last summer that DFT report that I've mentioned earlier reveals a peak 72% occupancy at our absolute peak. And also, VMS signage down the Wessex Way through the summer, directing drivers to Richmond Hill and Avenue car parks. But when your sat-nav says go to Bournemouth Pier, people tend to follow that and just appear at the pier and are then confused as to why everyone else is there as well. We know we've got capacity on those car parks. I went up on one of our red days last summer in June, one of the early ones before we had the PCN trial, and have photographs of the top of those car parks entirely empty and devoid of vehicles. CSS officers and additional CEO capacity to help move traffic and issue tickets, PCNs. But we also know that the most effective measure we saw was the uplifted PCN rate that we trialled in August. We still await news from the DFT on what we get to do next. We have been actively lobbying. We spoke with ministers at a parking event last week that Helen and myself were at. We've written to the DFT civil servants again and spoke with Lillian Greenwood and Jessica Toll about this, and hope we hear back soon. So I think we'll probably go elsewhere now, because I think we're going to do a little tour and then we'll come back for questions.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if before I go to Councillor Rigby, if the officers wanted to add anything. No, that's fine. Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be brief, but this is just to update you on where Environment and Place are with the ongoing piece of work, which is about living in vehicles or van life, however you want to talk about it. This originally came to Environment and Place from a motion to full council. I think it was probably over 18 months ago now that first came and was brought up. And since then, we've been looking at a way to complete this piece of work in a way which acknowledges the sensitivities around it in particular. We've reached a point where we were almost ready to go at 2 separate occasions, and then following further information which we'd received from some of the council's partners, like St Mungo's, for example, we decided not to. And what we want to do is really do this piece of work justice, because we want to do it once, we want to do it right, and we want to make sure it has a really good outcome, which hopefully ends up with a really strong policy for BCP Council to have. So, as Claire just said, we've, as of last week, gone out with a survey to those who are living in vehicles in BCP. And that's gone out via partners such as St Mungo's, Cushty Bock, and we've asked councillors as well to speak to people they know, because I know a lot of councillors do help and support people who are living in vans. The reason I wanted to bring it up is because it is a sensitive topic, because it has not just cultural sensitivities with Romani Gypsy traveller communities, but also the reasons why people are finding themselves more and more living in vehicles. And some of that might be through choice, but some of that might be through circumstances outside of people's control, such as homelessness, escaping abuse, many reasons which we've come across, and why we want to treat this in a way which is fair to everyone who finds themselves in this situation. And also, a lot of the people we've wanted to connect and speak to and hear from their lived experience are people who may, through whatever reason, be mistrustful of authorities, local authorities, or any other authority as well. So we want to make sure that their voices can be heard in a way which really listens to them and gives them the choice as well to remain anonymous if they want to, or not if they so choose to. So all I wanted to do is bring that up, just to say that I know this is coming up within this report you're looking at, but to please be mindful of the piece of work which we're doing in Environment and Place and the sensitivities around it. And we don't want to in any way frighten people away from engaging with us. What we want to do is really bring people to come and engage with us and try and find a way forward where we can, as an authority and as a council, provide the support and facilities which people who are living in non-conventional means need and require. Thanks very much.
Thanks, that's really useful, Councillor Rigby. Okay, so I've already, yes, Councillor Canavan, and I've got Councillor Farquhar on the list as well. Councillor Cannabell.
I just want to pick up something which Councillor Rigby's just mentioned, because when I saw the details of the survey that had been circulated from Environment and Place, I forwarded that email to Cushty Bock, because Councillor Cooper and I both met Cushty Bock in advance of the motion that we presented to council, and they hadn't seen it. So they were very cross that they had not been consulted about this survey, and were quite agitated about the way in which the survey had been written. So Peter's been in contact with them more recently. So I am concerned that there's something gone wrong in the system there, that they don't feel that they have been consulted. And I think Councillor Rigby is absolutely right. It's really important that we do engage with communities like that. So I wouldn't want that to slip between the stools. But I think it's important to understand that whatever the work that Environment and Place are doing, what the object of the original motion was to try and influence the parking strategy which we were hoping would come forward. And that's what it was. That's what we're still trying to do. All of this report hopefully will influence that strategy when it eventually arrives. So respect the work that Environment and Place is doing, but somehow or another, all of that has to be tied in with a parking strategy, because we need places for travellers to park. We need places for van lifers to park, and they might not necessarily be the same or require the same facilities. So that work just needs to be, I think, coordinated within the parking strategy, and I've just need some reassurance, I think, at the end of this debate from Councillor Herriot that we'll be able to do that.
So I think that was a question to Councillor Herriot.
Well, so I think we'll be happy to take the recommendation from the committee that comes forward, and certainly examine how that fits within the parking strategy as we go forward.
That's great. I have Councillor Farquhar next.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. I did seek permission from the Chair to address the board, and I very much appreciate the opportunity. I was somewhat alarmed. I have been in communications with Councillor Herrick at sort of cross purposes as regards around the sensitivities of van life. What I was concerned about particularly is the way that the paper has been published in relation to van life, people who dwell in vehicles, particularly focused on the ward or the Boscombe Overcliff, of which my ward covers a fair chunk, about half a mile or so. In that it talks about enforcement, it talks about changing TROs, it talks about the nature of what, as a local authority and within the regulations that the Road Highway Act and so on and so forth, that can be done. But it doesn't observe the motion which was put to full council, Part D, which is the promotion of anti-discriminatory policies and the protection of these communities from harassment and unfair treatment, whether by private individuals or public authorities, alongside the responsibility of all concerned to abide by existing laws and expectations. So when you say, when I say that the way that it's worded about changing TROs and etc., specifically for one section of the Overcliff and perhaps possibly other parts of the town, is the point which has been made that by Councillor Canavan, is that people who, for whatever reason, are living in vans and other vehicles will take fright. And the fact that I myself have been in communication with Kushti Bok as well when I was a mayor. But the reason why I supported of that motion is because when I became mayor, and I was invited by Betty Billington, British Empire Medal, to address Kushti Bok, she recognised that these individuals are part of the travelling community and therefore are a protected characteristic. So any discrimination is something which we have to tread very carefully with as a local authority and as a council. So the point which I'm trying to make is that it's very alarming to me to hear that I support the work that Councillor Rigby's doing on the place and environment things, that the message isn't getting out in a sensitive way to those that are actually going to be affected by any proposed TRO or recommendations from this committee to the cabinet or any other members, because I myself, I may well have missed it as a ward councillor that has half a mile on the seafront. Haven't seen that survey. Haven't had the opportunity to recommend people, spokespeople that for the community, the van life community, to actually engage with the council, which was the other part of the motion, which was to ensure that there was a forum of dialogue to be set up. That was part C of the motion, between local communities and travellers for a safe space in which discussion can take place and issues can be resolved quickly. So I echo the concerns that Kushti Bok and other elements of our communities that live in van life are not actually engaged, and we've not actually done the safeguarding. And I'd just like to use one example of van life communities in Kings Park driving specifically, where legislation of section 57 in this particular case was used blanket-wise to move the whole community on. Whereas I think in each case, and as I've dealt with enforcement and communities before, is that each case is particularly different when it's dealt with a case. So what I'd like to suggest to the committee here is that you are very aware of those sensitivities, and if the wheels are coming off and the community is not being engaged properly, then we may well be making a life very hard for not only the council, but the local authority. Thank you very much.
Councillor Trent.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm sort of a little bit worried that it's so easy to lump everyone who's living in a vehicle in the same category, and I thought this was kind of looking primarily at the tourist areas, and there may be a slightly different motivation for people sort of living in vans or, you know, mobile home type sort of vehicles in that kind of environment than there is in other environments. We've got quite a few cases, and you know, people are aware of it, sort of thing, in my ward, and it's usually an odd van adjacent to open space, usually heathland, and I'm pleased actually that most residents kind of accept it unless there's antisocial behaviour being caused by it, such as another instance where there's, you know, sort of the use of drugs and stuff like that, you know, and it becomes a little bit more of a problem to people because there are so many different types of van life. You've got the traveller community, which is an entity in itself. You know, they've got a tradition and so on that they follow. But a lot of other van life people are people who are just haven't got anywhere to go, and all that's left for them is the vehicle that they own. And those are the ones which I find that residents are actually quite tolerant of considering. And I know in the portfolio holders ward, there's one area where there's always several such vehicles there, and there's an element of tolerance there, and I'm a bit worried that that is getting mixed up with the tourism sort of parking issue, because I think van life is a separate issue, and there are 2 or 3 types of van lifers, so to speak, and you know, sort of some, you know, need help, but we don't have the level of help that these people need. You know, if you're on your uppers, you know, sort of sleeping on the street is the worst thing that you do. But actually sleeping in a van is possibly the least bad thing you do, because at least you've got cover and you've got some kind of security. So I think I just want to avoid us dealing with one problem and adversely affecting another problem by, you know, sort of having a one size fits all ruling, you know, because I do think that we have got different problems with different people. We got different communities, different traditions. And yeah, I think it's a devil's own work to try to get it sort of to do something which is fair on everyone. You know, if there's a camper van parked, say, on Sandbanks, Shaw Road or something like that, that's a different matter, because the chances are they're surfboarders who want to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning and sort of, you know, gaining the paddleboard or the surfboard experience. But, you know, those aren't the van lifers that are the ones that haven't got any choice. So I just think we need to kind of take each case as an individual and try to help in the most appropriate way in these various cases.
Thank you, Councillor Herrick.
I'd just like to say that the document responds to specific questions asked by the committee. I don't think we're making a judgment on what kind of what they could be used to achieve and not. And within the TRA process, there are obviously equalities impact assessments and things like that within the council's things as well that would consider that, just to reassure people.
Okay, and I think we probably want to be careful that we're not straying into outside of the actual, because this is, you know, more about the parking, what we can feed into the parking strategy, or possibly maybe the local plan as well. So I have Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I am going to stay slightly on that subject because it's what we were talking about. I'd like to be assured that whatever rules comes out of this is that it's implemented equitably. Just as someone's in a converted bread wagon and someone parked next to them is in a £100,000 motorhome, I'd like to know and be assured that they will be treated the same, and that you wouldn't move on the shiny motorhome and leave the van lifer. Everybody should be treated equally in this. There doesn't seem to be the enforcement at the moment. I know of places where they shouldn't be parking, and they are, in my ward and down near where I live. So whatever we decide on this, I just hope that it is enforced and enforced equally. Thank you.
So actually, I'd like to make some comments on this because I'm just remembering back to our last item and the 3 E's and the fact that enforcement is the last one. And I'm wondering if we didn't quite ask the right question here, and that maybe instead of saying what parking restrictions could be imposed, we should have been saying what can we do to limit overnight parking. And if we ask that question instead, we allow ourselves to think about the fact that if we don't want people to park overnight in random places in our area, maybe what we need to do is give people places that they could park instead and give people alternatives. And I think that same solution works for all the different communities, although the actual solution would be different. So, for instance, and I'm sure that's something, well, I hope that's something that the Environment and Place Committee would be thinking about in terms of the van lifers and travellers. But actually, I'm thinking also about the holiday makers. And I had a quick look before I came to the committee tonight to see where the nearest campsites are to BCP in case someone wants to visit Bournemouth and Poole and wants to come down here with their camper van as a tourist. And because we want tourists to come here. And there are no, as far as I can see, there are no campsites at all in BCP. There are no campsites. Now, this is interesting to me now because although I wouldn't come and camp here because I live here, I'm just getting myself a camper van and I'm going off to I've booked to go somewhere to see a play, and I looked to see where the nearest campsite was to that town, and oh great, it's right in the middle and I can walk to the theatre from the campsite. So I think there is something to be said for the fact that we don't have the facilities. If we don't have we assume that if people want to go camping, they want to be out in the country somewhere. But that's not how it is anymore. More and more people are getting motorhomes and camper vans. And why on earth don't we have a campsite that they can come here and we can encourage them to come and add to the vitality of BCP and actually camp in an official campsite? And why don't we do that? So, what's that? Yeah, okay. So, well, wherever. I don't think I'm suggesting specific places, but I am thinking that that's something that we could at least look into. Is there somewhere when not only are we doing a parking strategy, but we're also just about to start a new local plan. Maybe there's somewhere we can allocate. Now, I certainly hope we're also on that local plan thinking about where we can allocate a space for our traveller communities. I know that has been said many times before, and I certainly agree that we can't be picking that space without engaging with them, but with all the communities involved. But we certainly ought to be looking for space for travellers, for van lifers, for holiday makers, for anyone who needs to park, so they don't just have to park on the road because we haven't provided anywhere else for them. So I'm quite interested in us having a recommendation around considering spaces for people to park overnight and sleep when we do our local plan, including and yeah, when we do our parking strategy and when we do our local plan, including travellers, van lifers and holiday makers. Obviously making sure that we're not doing anything without consulting communities affected. How does that sound as a recommendation?
Firstly, I just want to go back to Councillor Wright's points about enforcement. So the enforcement is dependent on the type of vehicle and the classification of the vehicle. And that can sometimes complicate things. But that's not defined by us. That's defined as how they're registered with the DVLA. So it's with, you know, so vans with windows and vans that can be slept in. There's a few different classes in there. If you find that on the thing, and that may be why you feel that some vehicles aren't getting enforced against in your ward, because they might actually fall in a class that's okay, even though they're not. If that's the case, we'd be happy to hear if there are instances where you think enforcement should be happening, and either explain why it's not, or obviously enforce against that if appropriate. You're right, there are no campsites in the BCP area. The nearest campsite I think is in Litchett, or probably out in Merley. Although the one in Merley might actually be inside BCP just. But that's because of how the land use has traditionally been carved up. I think there's opportunities for some landowners to potentially do that, or leaseholders, but that is often complicated in the BCP area by the ultimate landowner, in terms of some of our kind of historic families, but also 5 Parks Act will impact on that as well, in terms of some of the parks that could be used. If you think Merrick Park, for example, is a 5 Parks Act thing, but I think it's certainly something that could be examined. I think the other thing in terms of kind of potential conversion of car park spaces, there is planning implications to that, and also the fact that there is a cost in terms of a value to the council in terms of its revenue to that space as well, that perhaps would not make that a cost-effective use in direct terms to the council. I think there's wider economic value to be found, but the council is in a difficult position when it comes to wider economic value, because we're having to look after our own to a degree first. But I think that probably provides some answers in that space.
Yes, so people do pay to use campsites, so there is some revenue.
Yeah, no revenue, but I think a revenue implication that would need to be examined all the same.
Councillor Canniman.
Yeah, quite a lot of issues there. I mean, the points that Councillor Trent raised are exactly the same points that were raised during the debate in the council meeting, and yet the motion was carried. So I'm not going to go back on over all of that ground again. The whole point of it was for us to look at the overall picture and to find a solution that, as Councillor Wright said, that is equitable for everybody. That was the whole purpose of it in the first place. So the issue of the vans on the Boscombe Overcliff, frankly, residents don't care whether these are vans or cars or what they're like. What the residents want are some parking restrictions that stop overnight staying. But you know, whether it's vans or not, they want parking restrictions that prevent people from staying overnight. Now, that does not seem to me to be on the wit of man or woman to find a way of implementing that, and yet we're still going around in circles about trying to find some enforcement that will actually free that area from that line of traffic on that side of the road. So that, and this report doesn't really address that in my view. So the other issue is about the local plan. So when the previous local plan that was being developed, this issue about having campsites was a key issue in the development of that plan, and the officers knew at that point in time that they would have to designate an area for the to include an area for some kind of travellers camp. And they had identified that, and there was a big hoo-ha about exactly where that was going to be. But yeah, you know, then the plan didn't happen. Since then, And part of the development of this new local plan will be actually the requirements are going to be better, going to increase, because the government will make the council, find these spaces whether they like it or not. So the obligation on the council will be greater as we develop these new local plans. So I think we really do need to put pressure on officers to ensure that we're beginning to do that work to identify where those sites might be. And the other point I wanted to just pick up on this document that's in the papers is about park and ride. It's pretty tiresome, forgive me for saying it, but it's pretty tiresome to hear the reports that on the one hand we can't do it, but on the other hand we need it. That to me does not make any sense. That we can't go around in circles about whether or not it's viable, because we don't know whether it's viable until we actually put it in place. And in order for it to be viable, it has to be tied with some overall plan about parking restrictions elsewhere, because the point about park and ride is to avoid people driving. So there is therefore a requirement to control parking in the areas where we don't want people to park, and we want people to use the park and ride. That's what in my view would make a park and ride scheme viable, and a commitment from the council to try and ease the congestion that we have across the conurbation. So again, it doesn't address that. And again, that was an integral part of the motion that we discussed at the council, and that was part and parcel of the wording that was agreed. Yeah, here we are still talking about it, still arguing about whether or not we should do it, and that just does not seem to me to be a very great step forward.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Yes, I'd like to just add on park and ride as well. I did notice in the report that it says in the beginning of the report that park and ride isn't possible, but it says at the end of the report that we're going to look into doing it again. So I was very pleased to hear the end of the report, because I think we should be looking into it again. As Councillor Canavan has said, it makes sense. It's not easy, but easy doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing it just because it's not easy. Obviously, because we're doing a whole parking strategy, we've got the opportunity to actually solve the problems. So it says one of the reasons we can't do park and ride is because there's too much cheap parking in the conurbation. So, well, we'll just have to change that, won't we? Because there's so many other things we could be using that land for if we could encourage people to do park and ride instead. And sometimes encouraging means you have to change things. I remember when park and ride was introduced in Salisbury, they reduced the number of parking spaces within the town and increased the parking space. Overall, there's plenty of parking spaces, but there's less in the town and more on the outside of town. So that's how it happens. Sometimes people won't like it at first, but once they get used to it, it's actually quite good, because it makes for better within the conurbation. It'll be better. There'll be less traffic. People who have to drive will actually be able to get somewhere without being in a traffic jam. So yeah, I certainly support having a recommendation to the parking strategy, that we definitely look at park and ride very seriously, and if there are problems, we try to get over them.
So, I mean, if the committee would like to recommend that we put charges up within the BCP area and charge where it's not free at the minute, then that would be something the committee could do. That is the only way that park and rides have been effective that I've seen, where almost every square inch beyond the park and ride is either permitted or charged so expensively that it makes the park and ride a much more attractive option to the incoming people. But that is that we also have the added challenge in BCP of the geographical width of mean it's unfeasible, but I think some of those challenges have to be really overcome to do. You would need a network of park and rides rather than just one in a specific location. I think Councillor Hadley, who's obviously been involved in this, will probably have some more to say on that too.
I will. I just first would like to come back on that myself because it was like my question. I'd like to give you a few suggestions that I have thought of in terms of what things that you'd need to consider for a park and ride. I believe that one of the main problems with increasing the parking charges would be the fact that some people who live within the area, obviously maybe they live in Poole, they want to park in Bournemouth, or they live in Bournemouth. Hoping will happen is a really good look at park and ride in the context of the whole parking plan, and in fact the whole transport plan, to see what creative ways you can fit it in rather than just think it's an either or. Okay, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid the sound went horribly wrong, and you sounded quite experimental, so I didn't really hear much of what you said just then. But in principle, that this has to be part of a much wider thing. We know that the places that have been successful are single centre cities where parking is very restricted, places which had appalling reputations in terms of being able to get about, places like Bristol, Salisbury, Oxford, and they are now struggling because not so many people are always going into the town centre. So the viability of park and ride, even in those centres that have historically worked, is more awkward. That doesn't mean we shouldn't look at it, but it does mean it's challenging everywhere, and we are challenged, as Councillor Herriott said, because we're multi-centric, and therefore people are not going to a single city centre in the way that they are in those places. But yeah, it's not a silver bullet, and where we've tried it previously, both for Christmas and also for some holidays, it's been so unsuccessful. It's just not even washed. It's got nowhere near washing its face.
Thank you. Was there someone else who wanted to speak on that? There was actually one more issue in the report I wanted to ask a question about, and that was right at the beginning with the consultation about the parking zones that had a lot of responses. I just wanted to ask the officers a couple of questions about that. Firstly, when are you expecting to get the results? And secondly, how much did it cost to? How much does it cost to do all this work to analyse it?
So if I answer that, at the moment, I couldn't tell you without going back and looking as to how much it costs to get it externally analysed. So I will need to take that away and come back. Okay, thank you. But also, just to be really clear, when it says the analysis is not yet complete, we do have it back from the external company. It is the internal analysis, if you like. So we're now going through all of the responses that came back to have a look at what it's actually telling us. I don't have an estimated time frame on that as it stands at the moment. It's being worked on.
And will that information be published when it's finished
Yes.
on the consultation website?
Yeah. So once we've got everything approved and it's been through the channels that it needs to, then it will be published.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else got anything else they want to say? So far, I think that I've got possible 2 recommendations, but there may be others. So what I've got is recommendations in terms of going into the parking strategy. First of all, that we make sure that we look seriously at park and ride and try and solve the problems and include it into our transport. I would say the transport strategy rather than just parking, because I think, as Councillor Hadley said, it's a bit wider. Does that sound okay with people? Are we agreed? Yeah.
So yeah, we're currently putting the local transport plan together. Parking strategy is a strand of that work further down the thing, so it does feed into the overall transport strategy for the area.
Okay, that's great. You're happy to. So if the board are happy for us to recommend that one, that's good. The other thing that I suggested was that we recommend that the local plan, when the local plan's considered, we look it into, well, certainly from what Councillor Canavan said, we'll probably have to look into make sure that we've got sites for travellers. But I don't think it does any harm for us to recommend to make sure that's the case. But I would also like to recommend that we have a look to see if we can find space for campsites for holidaymakers as well. If people are happy for us to feed that in. I think that's more the local plan rather than the parking strategy, but we could feed it into both. Is everyone happy with that as a recommendation? Has anyone got any other recommendations that they would like to suggest? No? Okay, good. Right, okay. We have got, the only thing that we've got left on the agenda now is the work plan. There are a few things to agree on the work plan that are very important. There's
Recommendations all agreed. We're
yes.
agreeing them con, everyone's happy.
Yes, everyone's agreed them. Yes, we're good. Yes. Yes, yes, you can leave. Yes. Okay, so so in terms of the work plan, so the first thing about the work plan I need to report is that there's one of the items on the actions is everyone listening? Hello? One meeting, please. One meeting, please. I have been looking into the complaints process as a rapporteur in terms of how the complaints process fits in with what we do as councillors. And I have had a chat to some of the officers in the complaints team, and they have agreed that they think it's a good idea for them to write an appendix to the complaints policy to basically talk about how what councillors do fits in with what they're doing. They've also got some ideas about how they might be able to improve the experience of councillors in terms of how councillors and officers work together, in terms of how when you've got something you want to ask an officer, how that works. They've got a few ideas and they're thinking about, because the way they do it with MPs is that it all comes into someone centrally, but they're not quite sure about it. So they're thinking of possibly doing an experiment, which I might be able to help them with in terms of what I do for my casework. But that's all just really thinking about things. In the end, basically what this is going to result in is they're going to do a report for the committee and that as long as we agree the work plan, that will be one of the things that will come to this committee for us to decide whether we're happy with it, make suggestions to change it, and then for it to then go on to Cabinet for a recommendation. So that's really just an update on that work, providing we're happy for it to go through on the work plan. Councillor Wright.
Were you talking about complaints around officers or complaints around councillors, the sort of thing that would go to standards?
Oh, no,
or
yeah,
both?
sorry to clarify, only talking about complaints from residents about the council. So, and the fact that some of this came up as a problem because councillors get people complaining to them, and then we go and sort their problem out, and then it never goes through the statistics, so they don't realise that complaint ever existed, whereas someone else will make an official complaint to the complaints team, and that will be recorded, and we might go all around the houses trying to solve something that somebody else has already got the solution to. And so it's kind of trying to sort those things. It's very kind of practical. It's kind of more office of things than it is councillor things. So that's why they're going to write the report on it and bring it back to this committee when it's done. They also realised that there were other things they needed to write appendices for in terms of the complaints policies, because they've come up across things that they weren't sure about and needed to. So that's they are going to report back at some stage to let us know about that, how they're getting on with that and how they're expanding the complaints policy to be able to cope with more different situations. It's really about them working more efficiently. Okay. That was really just me reporting back. So now the next thing is the work plan. So with the work plan, we do have something to agree, because what Kate and I did was we took all the statistics that came back from our workshop, and we had a look at them and picked out from that what the priority things we're going to do. And actually it was fairly clear which ones. The ones that we picked were the ones that came out top, and some of them have been, some of them will need several sessions. So we've put down, we've got on the matrix here how many sessions we'd need for each one, so that we try and make sure we don't overload the committee, but we have tried to pack it in a little bit. There was one item that didn't come up very high, but Kate was keen that we reconsidered it, but we haven't included it in here. That's licensing. I think we haven't included it. Well, I think we have, because I think it's on here, but we did agree that we weren't going to include that for now.
The agreement was that Kate was going to go away and meet with officers to find out if there was value that the board could add. So it's tentatively that it may be removed.
That may get removed because there was some question as to whether we can add any value, and if we can't add any value, then there's no point in doing it. So if you want to have a look at that matrix and see what we've got, is the pre-decision cabinet is the first column. The proactive is the one that we were doing in the workshop. The devolution one we put in is reactive, because we can't do that until we know when it's happening. And there are some items put down for briefings, but we can, it's suggested that we, after this meeting, we do actually ask you if you've got other topics you like to do for briefings, then we do some sort of a poll to make sure that we've got the ones that are our priorities. Any comments on the work plan, on the priorities that we picked from the workshop? Councillor Canavan.
Just a question of clarification, really. This list below paragraph 18 in the
Yes.
boxes there, are those items under the topic headings in some kind of order? Are they in priority order? Because that's not my memory
No.
of what we actually agreed.
No, they're not in no, Councillor Canavan, they're not in priority order. They are in a fairly random order. They are the things that we haven't included are not in there. But the suggestion is that all of these things will be done. It looks to me as though the order they're actually in is the ones that are going to take more resource going downwards. So regeneration growth plan, we're expecting that to take 3 meetings. Local plan, we're expecting to take 2 proactive meetings, 1 pre-decision. So as you can see going down, I believe it's been ordered by that, how much resource rather than priority.
Sorry, Chair, I'm a bit confused now because we seem to have had gone through a fairly laborious process, which I wasn't very happy about in the first place.
Yeah.
Of determining priorities, and now those priorities are being ignored, and we've just got a long list of stuff.
The priorities are not being ignored. The plan is to do all of these things. And the order that we do them in is will need to be decided in terms of how it fits in with other work. So, for instance, regeneration, we're not going to do them 3. We're not going to do them all 3 months in a row. There will need to be some gaps between them because some of the things the officers will need to write reports, though that we have put in to do the initial item on the growth plan in May, because if we want to do proactive, we have to make sure that it's in advance of things. So the local plan, again, we've got in that starting in May. So with some of them, we've got some dates in for, because the dates depend on what the item is and what the urgency for it is. So priority and urgency are not the same thing. Something might have really high priority, but something else might be, if we don't do it now, there's no point in doing it at all. So these are not in order of when we're doing them. They're not in order of priority. They're just all of the things. The idea is we're going to do all of these things because we've got this much space left to do proactive scrutiny, and the only thing that licensing is the last thing on the list and may drop off. If we need to drop something off, we can look back at priorities, or we can decide if our priorities have changed, if there's something that we aren't going to consider. So, for instance, if something else comes up and we need to take one of those slots for it because it's more important, we need to make a decision on what would drop off. We're not going to have like an automatic list. Does that make sense? You can also see later on, there's actually all the different meetings, and the things are not yet filled in because we haven't decided what's happening on each meeting yet. And sometimes that's difficult to decide this far in advance. So any more questions? Anyone have any objections? Want to suggest that any of these items shouldn't be on there, or any other items should be on there?
Well, I'm sorry to labour this, Chair, but I don't know what it is you're asking me to agree. Because if you're asking me to agree all of those, I'll say it's bonkers, because you'll never be able to cover all of them. And the whole point of the exercise we'd done before, I thought, was to determine the top 5 or however many priorities that we were definitely going to do. But at this rate, this list looks entirely random as to what we can do when, and there's no determination of what we do before, what one item we do before any other item. So it doesn't make any sense to me.
So, as I said before, this is not a priority list. This is a list of things that we are proposing that we do between now and the end of the the term. That's what we agreed that we were going to do, and that's what we've done. Okay, so we are. You can count the number of proactive slots that we've got. You can count the number of things that we've put into them. That's what we feel that we've got time to cover in the time available. Yeah.
No, I mean, I get that, but if you take licensing, just for the sake of argument, there's one proactive slot allocated to licensing. What I'm saying is, what if I don't want to do a proactive session licensing at all? That means I can have that slot for something else. And that's what I thought the exercise we'd done before was for.
So, Patrick, if you don't want an item to be included here, you can suggest that we take it out, and we can decide to take it out if we want to. If you think there's too many things on here and there's things you want to remove, then you can suggest removing them. As I've already said, licensing may be removed anyway. I did actually ask for it not to be put on the list. I'm not quite sure what happened, because I thought it was agreed it wasn't going to be on here, and we put it on later. I don't know what happened there. So I'm quite happy to suggest that licensing is that we don't put it on there until we know whether it's going to add value or not, because it didn't rate very highly. Yeah, if people want to change that, we can always put it back on later. There's a slot. Everything else rated as the highest things. I haven't got the spreadsheet in front of me as to exactly how they all rated, but everyone was given that, everyone saw it. So are you suggesting we take licensing out?
Yes.
Okay. I will second that.
I mean, the other thing, Chair, is I do not know why we are allocating one pre-decision cabinet slot for local safeguarding partnership, because we're going to do that work within either children's or adults anyway. So why would we want to do it here when we're going to do that work?
Okay, so the local safeguarding partnership, isn't that the statutory? Is that what it's called? That's the statutory one we do. So at the top it says pre-decision and statutory scrutiny, and that one's statutory scrutiny that we always do every year, that we have to do. So yeah, we have to do that.
So just to clarify, the ONS board is the body that's been designated as the statutory body for crime and disorder scrutiny, and to fulfil that, the board normally scrutinises the community safety partnership.
I think we should have called it the community safety partnership there, and that's been confused because we didn't give it quite the right name. Yeah. Let's change that to the right name. Okay, so we're proposing the changes. We changed that to have the right name, the community safety partnership, so we know what it is. We're proposing to remove licensing. So does everyone agree about removing licensing? Yeah. Okay. Right. Yep. Okay. So we're removing licensing. We can put it back later. Community safety partnerships getting the right name. Okay. Anything else that anyone wants to change about this? No. Okay. Right. So is everyone happy to agree this?
Agreed.
Okay. Right. I'm just going to quickly tell you that the next stage of this is that we will be outlining the scopes for each topic. You'll get information out that outside the meeting. And the only thing that's left to do, is Councillor Bartlett asked for us to consider a new item which came in after. I'm going to make a recommendation about what we do about it. I don't know if have you all seen it? Yes? Yes, it's been sent round to everyone, hasn't it? It's been sent round to everyone. It's concerning the lower gardens. And there are several aspects to it. There is a planning aspect to it. There is an environment aspect. There is a You put your computer away.
No.
Well,
I'm aware.
you were sent it on an email.
Just now.
No.
Oh, right.
Earlier. Yeah. So, do you want to summarise what it was? Shall I get it up on my email? It will take longer if people don't know what it is that we're talking about. We'd get through it much quicker otherwise. I can just make the recommendation, but if you don't know what it is, we can't discuss it. Councillor Canavan.
Well, I don't know what your recommendation is going to be, Chair, but frankly, Councillor Bartlett had done what I did and was actually ask the Director of Planning separately the answers to those questions, and he would know the answer because I do.
Well, my recommendation was going to be that we consider the planning questions of it when we consider our planning, because we're going to consider planning anyway. So we can just add those questions to it. If they're fairly simple, that shouldn't be difficult. I was going to suggest the environment and things to do with the actual lower gardens. He should direct that to the Environment and Place Committee because it's not our remit.
I don't think this should go anywhere.
Okay.
I don't think Councillor Bartlett's request should go anywhere, frankly, because it only required him to do what I've done and to ask those same questions of the Director of Planning, and he would know what the answers to those questions.
You should have asked the officers. That is true of a lot of it. Shall we agree to suggest to Councillor Bartlett that he could just ask the officers these questions and it doesn't really need scrutiny? Okay. We agree that. I'm happy with that. Okay. Thank you very much. Meeting closed. It's a little bit long.